across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And yeah, good afternoon. It's a special day, kids. 3 minutes after 1 o'clock, Chancellor Rachel Reeves unveiling her eagerly awaited spending review, announcing big funding boost for the NHS defence schools, along with tens of billions on major infrastructure projects. We're across it live as it happens. If you're watching in view, you'll see on your screen there the Chancellor is on her feet. Peter Cardwell joins us for this first section as well. And of course, comments from you too. Are you struggling, by the way, on the issue of social housing? I want to look into that in more depth. Also, illegal migrants are paying up to £20,000 for fake passports to fly into Britain, with police arresting 10 suspects in Manchester linked to a smuggling gang helping Iranians claim asylum. Tell us something we didn't know. This story of asylum and migration goes from bad to worse, it seems. And Elon Musk has issued a, well, it can only be described as a grovelling apology to Donald Trump on X, admitting that some of his posts attacking the president went a bit too far. Well, like suggesting your former boss was a sex offender. Yeah, it did go a little bit too far, Elon. More on that a little later as well. Everything you need to know. We'll have all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. All the usual terms apply. Blimey, stone the crows. What are the chances? Holy cow, jeepers creepers. What the heck is going on? Boomerang Rach has only gone and done it. She's grabbed the piggy bank, smashed it open and dished out the moolah. Roll up, everybody is a winner. From the NHS to defence, old folk to energy, she is the Robin Hood of modern times. The Chancellor has handed everyone, it seems, a slice of the action. Very few losers, but of course a shed load of winners. She is the Derren Brown of fiscal magic. She's Jesus without the fish and the bread. Somehow she's taken the grand figure of naff all and managed to turn it into eye-watering handouts of multiple billions of pounds to everyone and anyone who had their desperate palms wedged into the railings over there at the Treasury. She's delivered. Rachel Reeves is a genius, the Mr. Mistopheles of money. What's not to like? Can I have a rest now, Peter Cardwell?
You can. I think I need a rest after listening to that, to be honest.
I think so.
I mean,
but this is it. I mean, this is amazing. I thought we were all skint and times were tough and rubbish. Yeah. Loads of money there. It's everywhere. Apparently, there used to be a black hole. No black hole anymore. Rachel's got the big bags of cash. She's got it underneath the dispatch box. There's a dustbin liner full of £1 million notes, and they're in there, throwing them up in the air. The heady days are back.
The slight problem is to go along with that. You need to agree certain things. You need to say that growth has been good. It's at 0.7% at the moment, so not actually that good. You've got to say that they've fixed the foundations of the economy, which Labour would have you believe that they have. Rachel Reeves says everything's fine. Yeah. I think that's nonsense. We're in a situation as well where she's announcing lots of different things that have been announced already. For example, at the weekend we had a pre-announcement of 86 billion for the for science and technology. Well, that's just the budget of the science and technology department. That's just what it is. That's what they get anyway. That includes paying for their cleaners and receptionists and press officers. So a lot of this has been announced already. In terms of things that are interesting, I think certainly defence is interesting. We're going up from the current 2.3% to 2.7%. That will happen in 2 years' time. That's the ambition anyway, is to go up to 3% of GDP of what the country makes. So we're talking about 11 billion more pounds. Where in the last few minutes, she's been talking about various schemes, Merseyside, Teesside, talking about projects in Aberdeen, for example. These are energy technologies of the future. She's talking about Scotland has done pretty well out of this. We saw, of course, last week Labour a squeaking victory, a good victory for Labour actually in Scotland. The reform came from absolutely nowhere to be, literally 58 votes to come in third. Unbelievable. It was a really, really good day for them and a bad day for the Conservatives who came in fourth. So big emphasis on energy investment, Lots more details to come out of this. We sort of get the headlines, essentially, from Rachel Reeves and all of this, but she says that all this spending and energy will secure the UK's national security. The other big one, which I think is of particular interest to our viewers and listeners, Ian, is Labour saying it will end the use of asylum hotels by 2029. Now, this, of course, was a commitment in Labour's manifesto. This is being reiterated. She's already announced 150 million of funding to establish a new border security command. That was in the budget a few months ago. Now she's saying another 284 million per year by the end of the spending review for that border security command, and the government will, she says, tackle the asylum backlog. I'd be really interested how they're going to deal with the processing of migrants, especially as so many illegal immigrants are arriving every day. We saw over 1,000 of those arriving about 10 days ago. So there's an awful lot in this, but there's a lot of announcements, but really what usually happens with these things, what I think is going to happen today, the headlines tomorrow in the newspapers and when the news and throughout the day will be, isn't this marvellous, £39 billion for affordable housing over the next decade? Well, actually, hold on a second. The day after that, we get a little bit of analysis. 39 billion for affordable housing? Well, that's less than 4 billion a year. How many homes does that actually mean? How many homes are going to be built? How many people are going to go into those homes? There's a huge backlog already. So a lot of this will not necessarily unravel, but certainly be have the microscope held up to it.
Indeed. We're asking a question here this afternoon, specifically on, because there's loads of elements to this, and as you rightly say, the whole affordable housing thing, 39 billion over 10 years, etc. But, you break that down, 3.9 per year. What are they trying to solve? There's 2 points on this. Loads of people listening to this will themselves or their kids or grandchildren have been struggling to get, as we used to call it, on the council house ladder.
Yep.
You just can't get a look in. You could be on a list for... In fact, can I just directly ask our listeners and viewers this afternoon, if that is your story or the story of one of your kids who's attempting just to get some social housing, they might not want it for the rest of their life, just until you can get your foot under the ladder, save up some money, maybe buy your own house, etc. How hard is it to get social housing in this country? Are you struggling in that respect? 0344 499 1000. Just shine some light on that. I'd be intrigued just to get some of the anecdotal evidence as to an area that I don't think gets discussed enough. Because one of the issues that absolutely feeds into this, Peter, is this extraordinary claim of closing down the migrant hotels. We've got 30 to 40,000 people in migrant hotels and growing by the day.
And the thing is as well, if you clear that backlog, let's be generous to Rachel Reeves for a couple of minutes here and say that, okay, you're going to get them out of those hotels. That means you're going to process those people. You're going to say, are you actually an asylum seeker or are you bogus?
Yeah.
Well, we know that the rates of actually saying to people, you're an asylum seeker, you're here legitimately, that's something like 3 in 4. So you've got a large number of people who are going to need somewhere to live. If they're not going to live in the hotels,
that's the problem.
Where are they going to live?
Social housing.
We know that the social housing is under huge pressure.
Yep.
We know that even if the government does everything it's going to do and builds 1.5 million homes by the end of this Parliament, which I think is absolutely pie in the sky, and I speak as someone who used to work as a special advisor in the housing department, like, it takes a long time to build homes. You need people to build them, you need the materials, you need the planning permission. It takes a long time. They're behind already. So where do those people go? There are loads of people now who are in this country already, who are here legitimately, who've paid their taxes, who are saying, hold on a second, I quite like one of those affordable homes, please. I'd like to be further up the list. So there's huge demand there. Where are the other 25% of people, those asylum seekers who are not genuine asylum seekers? Do you deport them? Well, they've only managed to deport about 4,000 or 5,000 people since the start of this Parliament. Okay, that's a year since Labour came to power. Fair enough, that's some progress. They would say it's about 25,000, but a lot of those people are voluntary returns. In terms of people who are involuntary returns, you're talking about a few thousand. Where are all those people going to go? How are you going to deport them? How are you going to get through the legal process to get them on a plane to repatriate them to that country? Are you going to sort that out with a third country like Albania, for example? Where is all of that? So it's all very well to say everything's fine, we're going to throw money at this problem, everything's going to be marvellous, we're going to put, she's talked about 7 billion on 14,000 new prison places. That is something that would be really welcome. That would bring prison places up to about 100,000 and solve some of the backlog. But where are you going to build those prisons? How are you going to build them? Well, if you're going to build a load of houses, where are the people to build the prisons? Also, where does the planning permission come? Do you build them in a place where people want them? Well, very few people want a prison in their backyard. Can you actually persuade people that this will provide jobs, money, local services will, like food businesses, for example, will do well out of this. Can you persuade them in that way? So there's an awful lot in this. There's awful lot to process, and I think there's a lot for people to be convinced by. Yeah. And as Rachel Reeves herself says at the moment, people are not feeling, as she puts it, the benefits of Labour. Well, actually, if you feel you've got a bit more money in your pocket and the government is doing well, maybe you'll be grateful to them at the next election. There's no sign of that at the moment.
None whatsoever. And I don't think there's any serious economist. We'll talk to Jonathan Portes on this in a sec about the economic factors around this. There's no genuine sense, a feel, a vibe that things are going to get better. And I don't say that just from my own kind of perhaps unflattering way that I would describe this government, but even objective financial onlookers are saying, this could be years before people start to have that kind of 1997 moment when there was a few quid in your pocket, the lollipop lady had a property portfolio, students could write mortgage applications on the inside of their leg and get a house. Though you could walk into a garage and drive out for 50 quid in a brand new car. All of those, those days are gone. Let's just have a listen back to that issue of asylum seeker hotels. A little clip of the Chancellor speaking just 10 or 15 minutes ago on this specific issue of ending the reliance on hotels for asylum seekers. Here it is.
The party opposite left behind a broken system. Billions of pounds of taxpayers' money spent on housing asylum seekers in hotels, leaving people in limbo and shunting the cost of failure onto local communities. We won't let that stand. So I can confirm today that, led by the work of my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, we will be ending the costly use of hotels to house asylum seekers in this Parliament. Funding that I have provided today, including from the Transformation Fund, will cut the asylum backlog, hear more appeal cases and return people who have no right to be here, saving the taxpayer £1 billion a year.
No right to be here. She drops her voice at that point, like I'm very strict on this.
Had her allocation lessons.
Here's the problem, Boomerang Rach. Those people that do remain here will go into, spoiler alert everybody, will go into social housing. And there's the problem. Nobody should be above a British taxpayer in the list, the waiting list for social housing. It's as simple as that.
It's really simple.
It's not going to turn out like that, though.
And it comes back to the issue that Nigel Farage talks an awful lot about. Can we be a knock a bit as well, although not as much as they should in my estimation, which is fairness, and saying if you've paid in, if you're born in this country, if you've worked, if you've paid taxes, you should be further up the list than people who have contributed absolutely nothing to this country. But is that actually the case? Well, for a lot of the time, it is not, and people feel very, very aggrieved by that. But interestingly, I think in a lot of that, that's getting to Rachel Reeves, that's getting to Keir Starmer. And what we're seeing is, for example, them talking about things like the parties opposite, plural. They're not just talking about the Conservatives, they're talking about Reform UK as well. We had a direct attack as well on Nigel Farage. Rachel Reeves earlier on saying that he had racked up £80 billion of unfunded commitments. He might be playing friend of the workers now, but some of us are old enough to remember when he described that disastrous Liz Truss budget as, I quote, the best Conservative budget since the 1980s. So they're under pressure, they know this, despite the fact they've got about 170 majority. Labour are in trouble, and they know this. They've seen this. OK, they won that seat at the Scottish Parliament last week, and good for them. But they know that there are many, many problems ahead, especially in the Scottish, Welsh elections and the local council elections.
100%. And we are and these would be the kind of way they're talking when the advisors sit around, and you know this, Peter, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor. They are nearly a quarter of the way through their Parliament. When you look at it like that.
And how long can you keep blaming the last guys? When people are going to go in less than a month's time, they're going to go, hold on a second, Keir Starmer, you've had a year here.
You're in charge now.
You're the man. You've got this huge majority. You've got the power, the money, the controls, the levers to do this. Why isn't the country better than it was? Now, he would argue that it is better than it is. I would be really interested to hear from our viewers and listeners as to whether they agree with that. Yeah, are we in a better place? And it is interesting when it comes to their take on things like asylum. The problem with Labour and migration, Peter, as you know,
it's just not in their DNA. It's not there, is it? They can talk about it. She can drop her tones and sound, you know, who are not meant to be here, and all the rest of it. Starmer can talk about an island of strangers, which, you know, had it come from a Tory leader, they'd probably be doing 7 years in Pentonville right now for hate crimes.
Alongside Lucy Connolly.
Indeed, yes. It would be in that ballpark. They can say all of this stuff, but nobody really believes that they believe it. And that's where Reform really do steal the march on this, because they have the credibility. There's no doubt about it. It's interesting, David Bull, have you noticed people are trying to uncover tweets of things David Bull said years ago? Look, he once said this.
David Bull has a past.
I know. How dare he? I thought David Bull was born yesterday. But David was... in fact, this wasn't even in the distant past. It was quite recently when he talked about immigration being the lifeblood of the UK. But he then went on to say that, you know, but you've got to have a fair playing field. It's got to be fair. And he listed a load of reasons why things aren't fair. But what he was roundly attacked by, and I think Rupert Lowe was one of them, was this idea of the lifeblood. Now, of course, if you're the Reform chairman, or even just a party member, as David always has been, you have to caveat stuff, don't you?
Yes.
And otherwise people are going to, he's a mad racist. The reason he said it's the lifeblood is to offset that potential remark.
Ian, I, for one, I'm just shocked, I tell you, that on a political attack, the full context of the remark wasn't given, because that's the first time I've seen that happen.
Yeah, I know. It's unbelievable, isn't it? It's unbelievable.
That's all the time. That's what people do.
We want your responses on anything connected to the budget. I'm particularly fascinated about social housing. I think this doesn't get the airtime it should, frankly, social housing. There is a need for it. I know the whole, you know, the old kind of fashioned leave school, get a council house thing. I know that's long gone, but there is still such a thing as social housing. There are people in this country who desperately need social housing. We have people living in squalor because there isn't adequate social housing. So where's Rachel Reeves going to put 30 or 40,000 asylum seekers? Just before we go to a break, Peter?
Very briefly, the Liverpool to Manchester Northern Powerhouse Rail scheme is to go forward. So there will be about £100 billion put into building a new railway between Liverpool and Manchester.
Looking forward to that. Howard Cox is going to join us a little later, of course, talking about what all of this might mean for the motorists. This isn't a budget, of course. This is a spending review. We'll speak to Michael Clark from Turn to Us. Also, Maurice Lang joins us from Centre for Cities. And in a couple of moments, Professor Jonathan Portes, the economist, will be online with us as well. Over to you. Are you struggling to get social housing? Your thoughts on the budget? The spending review. 0344 499 1000.
If there is a resolution there, will they try and have a go at another state to really test the Article 5, and will NATO react? Can we get on a war footing? I mean, that's what's been declared.
Right.
I think, you know, the need is there, the threat is there, and as a nation, we've got to make those tough decisions about whether we invest more in our social welfare, our NHS, or we do what every government needs to do, which is protect our society and our people against aggressive acts.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, 22 minutes after 1 o'clock. Peter Cardwell is with us looking over Rachel Reeves' big giveaway. There are some losers as well, Peter, which we'll come on to in a second, but not everybody is trousering the cash today.
That's right, and I think that there will be a number of different departments not particularly happy. Defence have done well, of course. Health, she hasn't really mentioned. Oh no, hold on. Funding increased by 3% a year in real terms. That's just come through in the last couple of minutes there. Yeah. An extra 29 billion per year in the day-to-day running of the health service. But yes, there will, of course, a lot of this will be working out who's not going to be happy. The Home Office, I think, quite a number of senior police officers have raised the spectre, saying we don't have enough money to do what you want us to do. It'll be really interesting. The announcements so far on Home Affairs have been on prisons, which is Ministry of Justice, and things like Asylum. It'll be really interesting to see if the police and senior leaders like Sir Mark Rowley, the Metropolitan Police Chief, who have said that they are worried about having enough money to do what the government is asking them to do.
We spoke to a senior officer just a couple of days ago on this very point, really worried. We know that there were certainly some rumblings coming of a bit of a battle between the Home Office and the Treasury. That's not in itself unusual. That's what it's all about, trying to get some cash. Suggestion, though, that Yvette Cooper might have lost out on something. Yeah,
I think so. On wasted, certainly she won't be happy with the policing budgets. Interesting one on wasted money as well. Rachel Reeves says, I will be ruthless in calling out wasted money. That is an absolute response to what Reform are doing on their Doge review and a lot of their different councils talking about national government as well. Rachel Reeves has said for the first time in 18 years this government has run a zero-based review, a line-by-line assessment of government spending. I have been relentless in driving out inefficiencies and I will be ruthless in calling out waste with every penny being reinvested back into public services. That's a lot easier said than done.
Let's get a word on all of this from Jonathan Portis, Professor of Economics at King's College. Jonathan, good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon.
There's a lot of billions of pounds floating around in this announcement in the last half hour. Has that big black hole just got bigger?
No. Remember, this spending review doesn't actually change the overall totals of either spending or tax. What she's talking about is allocating the money that was already penciled in. So the numbers actually haven't changed from the numbers we saw in the OBR forecast of March earlier this year. So in that sense, the overall numbers haven't changed. What's changed is we now have a lot more detail about where that overall money is being allocated. And as I think you've correctly just said, the big picture here is the winners, quote unquote, are defence, a big boost to housing, a big boost to infrastructure spending across the board, new nuclear plans, transport in the north and so on. Those are the winners. And then correspondingly, the implicit losers are the departments of the budget whose budgets are not protected. That includes the Home Office, as you just said, policing, some other areas, university, sadly, my own sector, and some others will have done somewhat less well. But for exactly where the pain is going to fall, we'll have to wait for the detail. But that big picture is pretty much as you've just outlined it.
The interesting thing, of course, about politicians, Jonathan, as you know, some would argue politicians were put on this earth to be lampooned and satirised and cartooned and given a sort of public lashing every now and again, verbally speaking. We all get that. But in many respects, in fairness to any chancellor of whatever political colour, it is the world's most impossible job, right?
It's a very difficult job, and she was dealt a very difficult hand. Some of us would have said that a lot of this infrastructure spending that's been announced, a lot of that could have been announced by George Osborne almost, more than 10 years ago, at a time when the government could have borrowed effectively at close to zero interest rates. In other words, it would not have cost us much. Unfortunately, Rachel Reeves, I think it's still the right thing to do to invest in this money, but it's going to cost us, because of that failure to do it 10 years ago, it's going to cost us a lot more because interest rates are a lot higher and borrowing is a lot more expensive now. So I think she is playing a very difficult hand reasonably well, I would have said.
Just give us your take on the wider sort of economic picture. Everything is interlinked, of course, in the world today, whether it's our relationship with other European countries or on the wider stage with big economies like India, like the United States, etc. I keep hearing, and I don't know what your take is on this, but every time, and of course, nobody should live their life through social media. It is a den of iniquity and you will go mad after just several hours. However, there does seem to be a fairly prevalent and fairly regular take that economically the world, including us, of course, has got 5 or 10 years of real struggles to come, whether you're in Germany, whether you're in the United States, whether you're in the United Kingdom. Do you concur with that, or is that just ultimate pessimism?
I think that's a bit pessimistic. I mean, you know, we are seeing in some ways incredible ways of technological progress at the same time, right? Not just AI, and we have no real idea what the economic impacts of that, but in terms of medical science, quantum computing, and so on, things which have a real potential to make the economy better, but indeed our lives better. I think the threats we face are in some sense largely political, right? We have a president, the president of the largest, leading the largest economy in the world, who is doing his best to take us back to the 1930s, both economically in terms of protection and, frankly, politically in terms of openly moving away from the democratic experiment of the United States. That is a pretty big deal. And of course, the 30s were not a comfortable time for this country, or indeed any country, from either an economic or political perspective. That is really, really dangerous. But I don't think that's sort of because of fundamental economic forces. That's because of the current geopolitical situation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are, not just Republicans, but some would say, no, actually, Donald Trump is just moving away from global groupthink. He's doing something slightly different. He's taking on China, playing them at their own game to a degree, and we can see correlations there, of course. He's just doing it in an unconventional fashion. Watch this space, and America will grow like you've never seen, Jonathan.
I mean, I think that there was a perfectly reasonable argument for regarding China as a competitor as well as a cooperator, and using the US's economic power in that respect. That does not explain declaring economic war on Canada, threatening to invade Greenland, impose it, effectively cancelling the US-Mexico-Canada free trade agreement, which Donald Trump himself renegotiated in 2017. So I think attempting to sort of explain this as some sort of rational economic strategy, much as economists like me would like to, we find that very difficult indeed.
In terms of what's happening here then, just final point, Jonathan, we were discussing earlier the heady days of the mid-90s when Blair came into Downing Street. We remember it well, shaking all of those hands as he was walking up that most famous street on the planet. Blur playing in the background. Things Can Only Get Better by D-Ream playing on the other I mean, these were heady times. Everyone was having it off royally, financially speaking, of course. And life was good. There was a sense of real optimism. When are we going to get that again?
I think we are sadly a long way from that. And I would not presume to predict that we will go back to that. Things changed a lot in 2008 and the global financial crisis and the aftermath, and we've struggled to recover from that. I think that some of the things the government has announced today should improve the UK's economic prospects, and indeed, living standards for ordinary people. You just mentioned social housing. That is really important. Housing is the main challenge facing millions and millions of families. So things can get better, but it's not going to be easy.
Jonathan, thank you for your time, sir. Really appreciate that. Professor Jonathan Portis from King's College with us with his take on that big spending review. Still going on in Parliament. I think we're now getting the opposition response. Peter, just briefly.
Yes, Sir Mel Stride, who is the Shadow Chancellor, ridiculing, saying it's borrow, borrow, borrow. He's also called Rachel Reeves the tinfoil Chancellor, saying that she's fiddled her fiscal rules, and she is a tinfoil Chancellor because she's flimsy and ready to fold under pressure to spend more money. So those are the lines that he will want to get out there.
Could have been the cardboard box Chancellor on that basis.
Yes, although less of a good hat, which obviously keeps away all the mind control.
And some
vibes.
cardboard boxes are quite tough, so it might have been the wrong analogy.
Unless they get, exactly. Unless they get wet sitting on your doorstep.
Peter Cardwell stays with us for a bit. We're going to look at social housing a little bit more as well. What does it mean for you? The spending review. She's dishing out the cash. Has she handed it to all the right places? Howard Cox with us later. What does it mean for motorists and the like? Are we going to get any sort of sense? It's not a budget, remember, but we can extrapolate some things from this in terms of direction of travel. And in terms of social housing, I'm going to throw that specific question in because I think this is going to be, I think there's two things that are going to be big debates over the next 5 years. One, smartphones for under 16s. That's a separate issue. But number two, social housing is going to be housing in general, and who gets it, and what do you do with 40,000 people currently stuffed into hotels? Lines are open on that. If you've been on the social housing list, or one of your kids or grandchildren are there, how's that going? You hear stories of people who've been there for 10 years, for goodness sake. Couple of guests on the way on this. Peter Cardwell still with us. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 25 to 2. We'll speak in a moment to Michael Clark and Maurice Lang on impact, what it all means. Peter Cardwell is still with us. Peter?
Well, some of the losers have now emerged from all of this. Some of the different percentages have come out. We know, for example, that the Foreign Office and overseas aid is going to go down, but the overall budget of the Foreign Office, FCDO as it's now known, Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, down 5%. The Home Office, very interesting one there, of course, in terms of policing.
Yeah.
A lot of the emphasis on asylum, less on policing. Their budget is down 2.2%.
That's a bit weird, isn't it? Because this is an area that we discuss every day.
Yeah, well, we're going to see
shoplifting crimes, issues, mobile phones being stolen, housebreaking, not getting a response.
And those are ways in which people interact with the government quite a lot when they say, right, where is authority? Can the police help me? So I think there'll be a lot of police leaders very unhappy about that. HS2 is a sort of separate issue, but the Department for Transport down as well. The Department for Culture down a little bit, 0.2%. Interestingly, Environment, Food and Rural Affairs down nearly 1%. So this is just a redistribution of money. There is no new money. This is just today, the spending review, how they're going to spend the money over the next few years. But what is clear, certainly from what the Conservatives are saying, a little bit of what Labour are saying, but what a lot of economists are saying are the money has to come from somewhere. Tax rises probably coming in the budget in a few months' time.
Do you know what somebody told me a few years ago when Theresa May was busy getting rid of 20,000 police officers, that one of the theories behind it is that you simply won't need these officers because technology, AI in particular, will mean that going forward...
Where have I heard that before?
They jump the gut. Yeah, I know, it comes up every now and then. Well, we'll have so much CCTV, we'll just catch everybody. But apparently AI is going to really do a number on criminality. So nobody will be committing crimes, hence the reason why the Treasury are perfectly relaxed about cutting budgets. Is that a tinfoil hat moment, or is that a...
It'll be really interesting to see. Almost every advance in technology we've often seen, call me a Luddite if you want to, has not meant, you know, we were meant to have, not to work hard, we were meant to have loads of leisure time because technology was going to mean that we'd have so much more time. Well, we haven't.
Sitting around like old villagers, playing wooden instruments.
Drinking warm beer and watching, you know, maidens on bicycles. You know, this is
maidens on bicycles.
Old maids
they
on
were
bicycles.
a great band. They used to be on John Peel's sessions, didn't they?
Wasn't that what John Major said?
Number 7, maidens on bicycles. I never forget those moments. They were
very good John Peel impression there.
Wasn't bad, was it? Yeah. R.I.P.
Very appealing.
Rachel Reeves, of course, unveiling biggest cash injection into social housing and affordable housing in half a century. 39 billion will be spent over 10 years to build 1.5 million homes. I think I'm right in saying, Peter, just a quick word, they're behind their target at the moment. It's a parliamentary target of 1.5 million
by the end of the Parliament. They're already behind. Where does the money come? Where do the labourers come from? Where do the materials come from? We don't have enough concrete. We don't have enough bricks.
Well, indeed, you don't have literally the materials, as you know from working in that department. That's right. 300,000 houses a year. Macmillan did it back in the 50s and got the big job as Prime Minister after his troubles, of course. But
Supermark did it. I'm not sure Super Ange is going to manage it somehow.
I'm not sure. Let's have another listen to the Chancellor then unveiling Labour's bold plan on this one.
I am proud to announce the biggest cash injection into social and affordable housing in 50 years. A new affordable homes programme in which I am investing £39 billion over the next decade. Direct government funding to support house building, especially for social rent.
Well, it's a lot of money. Is it enough money? In a moment, we'll speak to Maurice Lang on a wider issue on the speech today. But first, Michael Clark, Director of Impact at Turn to Us. That's a national charity helping people who are struggling financially. Michael, good afternoon to you. I imagine your phones have been ringing off the hook for the best part of the last few years. Good afternoon.
They have rather, and I don't think that's necessarily going to stop. There are some welcome decisions here, obviously, social housing investment could be transformative, but we need to see the detail. Free school meals, it's a start. We know that free school meals do help. The rollback on winter fuel, already flagged, was very welcome. But it doesn't, in the immediate term, support people who are stuck in low-income debt, housing costs, NHS delays, leading the kind of lives where one financial shock can just push you over the edge. So we would like to see the kind of immediate investment in benefits which people can actually afford to live on, because that also adds up to a long-term investment in prosperity for the country. That was a great way to put it when you said one financial shock. I was talking to somebody who said just getting a parking ticket one day for somebody was the difference between the entire family budget, which was skeletal and, you know, precarious in equal measure. Suddenly you get a 60 quid parking ticket, you're absolutely stuffed for the rest of the month because you're working out your budget on every single pound, every single 50p counts. And you wouldn't think in the 21st century, Michael, we'd be in that place, but we really are in that place, and there are millions of people in that place. Yes, we are. And there are bits and pieces in the budget that will help. And as I say, there are things which we welcome, but I don't see it addressing the key issues. I don't see any change in the attitude to cutting disability benefits, for example. I don't see the removal of the 5-week delay in getting universal credit, which trapped people in a debt spiral before they even managed to claim benefits. So there's still, I think, a lot we would want to see changed here.
And this is the difficulty, isn't it? Peter Cardwell's still with us in the studio, Peter, that, you know, no chance to give Rachel Reeves and predecessors benefit of the doubt. No one comes into that job and says, I want to make people worse off. Everybody wants to make a difference. And as Michael was saying, you know, there are bits in it that, you know, might well work in terms of where the money is being allocated. But you're never going to be able to tick all the boxes on it.
It's probably impossible.
And it's probably worse now that since 2008. I don't know. Is it that?
I think it is.
Because they did say that could last decades. You know,
a lot
years,
of people
decades.
just don't feel that they're getting better, and it's not just about the pounds and pence. And that story very true about a parking ticket. What happens if your washing machine breaks down? You know, there are all
stuff like that. You get a puncher in the car.
Yeah,
you know,
all that sort of stuff. Those unexpected bills for people living paycheck to paycheck, or perhaps not even that. Maybe benefit payment to benefit payment. And what Michael and his organisation do, and organisations like that, are really good organisations, but that in an ideal world they wouldn't exist. And the problem is that more and more people feel they're relying upon them and can't rely on the money coming through the door. And there are people who are relatively wealthy who still feel that they can't perhaps afford a second child.
That's also been a factor quite recently, where middle classes even, you know, suddenly realised that, you know, when they could be a little more, you know, we can go to a pub lunch on a Saturday, don't even have to worry about the extra 80 quid that it's going to cost. But even those areas are feeling the pinch. And Michael Clark as well, on that point of, you know, everybody feeling a little bit of something here, none of this would be, I mean, it's bad, but it wouldn't be quite so bad if you could sense sort of optimism on the horizon. If you thought, OK, it's a bit rubbish, difficulty with health, waiting lists, housing, etc., but I'm confident that in a few years we'll have turned a corner. That lack of confidence is the problem here, isn't it? Because I don't sense many people have it.
But in terms of people who contact us, in terms of the people we talk to, no, I don't think people do. I think there are a lot of people who are desperate. I think there are concrete things that could be done to address this. I've already mentioned cutting that 5-week delay. I think abolishing the bedroom tax, which has tipped so many people in their own homes, into absolutely dire straits because of the gap between what they need to pay the rent and what they're provided with. And it's important to remember, you mentioned it earlier, people who are working, who are struggling. It's quite scary how many people who are in what once upon a time we would have thought of as stable, really quite credible middle-class jobs who need to claim benefits. Supply teachers, nurses, health workers, people in the care working industry, everyone, lots of people in those sectors, they can't make ends meet.
We were saying this only yesterday, is that we now live in a world where your council tax bill looks like the kind of what a mortgage used to look like. Your energy bill looks like what we're talking hundreds of pounds for each of these bills. That never used to be the case. People used to look forward to paying off a mortgage and then going, hey, I could just pay a few bills now. Those few bills are massive. Collectively, they're huge.
I think that's an interesting thing because not everybody has a mortgage to pay off. Huge amounts of people will obviously live in the rented sector, whether it's private or social housing.
Where it's ongoing.
Right, and where you actually start looking at the actual cost of events in the private sector, it's absolutely astronomical, way beyond what you would expect to pay in a mortgage. And I found it interesting that Starmer's framing of the housing kind of like beneficence coming our way was in terms of home ownership, which is fine for people who can get that credit, who can actually afford to pay a mortgage, who can get on the ladder. But there are millions and millions of people who aren't going to be able to.
Absolutely.
So we'd like to know what is in there for them.
Yeah, what is in? That's the $64,000 question. It says, Michael, great to have you on, sir. Thank you very much indeed. Michael Clark from Turn to Us, the charity helping people who are struggling financially. Let's talk to Maurice Lang, analyst at Centre for Cities, a think tank dedicated to improving economies of UK's largest cities and towns. And Maurice, it's usually seen as a great indicator, seriously, how booming is your neck of the woods when you walk down the high street on a Friday? Are the shops opening? Are there, new businesses beginning? How is it looking, whether it's a small town or a large city? They are great, I suppose, a visual litmus test of how well we're functioning. How's it looking out there, and has it improved today? Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. I think there's lots of things to be positive about in the budget. They've announced a lot of infrastructure spending, which should play out over the long term, being with a positive impact. Whether or not that has a direct impact on the high streets immediately or tomorrow remains to be seen. But as far as some important infrastructure investments they're going to be making, there's definitely positive things in the budget today.
It is difficult in terms of the economies of our, what our high streets and what our cities look like. I mean, there's not a week gone past over the last few years when we haven't talked about businesses closing down and businesses struggling, not necessarily just with the competition with online companies, etc., but also with business rates and all sorts of other taxations. It's a really tough time out there to retain a vibrancy in your area, shall we say?
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think at Centre for Cities we do a lot of work looking at the relationships between sort of the performance of big cities and then how that filters out into the performance of places around them. And we would say that there's a strong link between the performance of Manchester and Leeds and then how that affects the towns around them. And so some of the infrastructure investments that the government has announced will have an impact in those larger cities, and that'll filter out into the areas around them, is what we would expect.
That's a good point. Peter Cardwell.
That will take time to come through.
Morris, it's Peter Cardwell here. I just wondered, in regard to this rail link that's been confirmed between Liverpool and Manchester, presumably you welcome that as well.
Yeah, I think that we hope that we think that improves accessibility. It'll be important for firms located in those places to have access to as many people who could take up jobs with those firms, and that'll help them be more competitive because they in the long run. And there'll also be other day-to-day things where people will be easier to move from one place to another, and that'll be a positive thing.
Yeah, we talked about optimism with our last guest, Morris. Just a final point: are you optimistic the next 5 years? They always used to talk about in the Labour Party things can only get better back in the day. Do you find that applying right now?
Well, I mean, I think it's difficult to make strong projections of what's going to happen, but I think an important thing that the country hasn't been doing enough of is large-scale infrastructure investment, and a lot of what this spending review has been about is about those types of things. So things might take a while to get better, but a lot of these things are the right decisions.
There it is. Thank you very much indeed for that, Morris Lang, analyst over there at the Centre for Cities, who look after the economy, certainly look at the improving economies of the UK's largest cities and towns. We're going to talk to Howard Cox in just a second. We've only got a few minutes with Peter Cardwell after that, because he's got to leg it to the gym and then to the pub.
And then back with Jeremy Kyle later.
And then back with Jeremy Kyle later, yeah. I have no idea why I decided to completely libel you, Peter, in the middle of that, in the middle of a fairly sensible...
Small payout will be absolutely fine. I mean, that's something that's my personal finances sorted.
That's the way it works for the next few weeks. Listen, stand by. More from Peter on the way. Howard Cox joins us. Over to you as well. Loads of questions on this. Social housing is a particular focus of ours. We'll do all of that and more coming next on Talk.
I actually think the burqa should be banned. I think it is reprehensible in this country. I think anything that actually blocks communication is a barrier to communication and integration. I know this only too well, but living in East London as well, which is we've got silos of people who don't integrate. That is not how you build a great country. Now, that goes further. Nigel talked about this, about facial coverings, about crash helmets, for example, in public places. This is about law and order and safety. And also, it's about having shared British values. And we need to make sure we do have that to build Britain back to being great.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
I promise, because it's a sort of special day today. Well, I say a special day. Rachel Reeves spoke. That doesn't usually make it special. Nobody sends a card saying Happy Rachel Reeves Speaking Day. But you take the point. There's a significant day, shall we say, because we're hearing about how all the money is being spent. Haven't had time yet to go to your calls and comments. We've got loads of calls, certainly on social housing, which is something I feel very strongly about, what's going to happen there. And lots of messages and tweets and the like coming through, which we will get to in the next section. Peter Cargwell is with us for the next few moments as well. Howard Cox is with us, founder of Fair Fuel UK. Good afternoon to you, Howard.
Hello, Ian. Hello, Peter.
Hello there.
Nice to have you with us as ever. Look, it wasn't a budget, we know that, so we weren't going to get, comments on what happens at the pump specifically, but it was about spending. How did you sense this panned out in the last hour, if you managed to sit through it, that is, Howard, without falling asleep and gnawing your own elbows?
Well, there was just all these incredible numbers coming out saying I'm spending billions there, millions there. I kept hearing I record this. We've never spent all those sorts of things. I lost the will to live in terms of the number of decimal points are before the trillions. Yeah. The thing I have, though, is that it's no doubt about it, this budget in autumn will be a tax-grabbing budget. And the easiest way to... I met with one Labour MP earlier this week, and he said it's about time the motorists paid for something. And they could pay, they could pay. This is what they said. For 15 years, you've done well, Howard, in getting a fuel duty freeze, and you should be commended for that. But I'm afraid they should pay for this, and they should also, therefore, pay for the pensioners, the turnaround for the fuel heating allowance, that they've U-turned on. No, I lost the will to live deliberately when she said things like, that's my choice, that's Labour's choice, and that's the people's choice. And I don't remember the people being asked about spending.
No. And there it is. It's interesting what you just said about the motorists, because the problem with that kind of thinking is that that's not a solitary Labour MP. There is a kind of sort of left-wing view, let's put it like that, where people genuinely think that that's the story, that the motorist should, as if the motorist isn't already being taxed out of their own pants through not just at the pump, through their insurance, through road tax, through all sorts of other measures, congestion, ULEZ, you name it. I mean, the motorist is contributing just fine, thank you very much.
Something to the tune of £1 billion a week, £50 billion a year is what the motorist contributes. And, this Labour guy said, well, what's another couple of billion? No one will notice. That's the sort of thing. And, and I do know that the 5p cut that Sunak gave us a few years back is going to be reversed. And there's talk about another 5p on top, so it'll be 10p. Increase, and that works out for an HGV driver, a business, which diesel, £100 extra per tank full, and that's extra. Yeah. And when you see, like, as everything to do with inflation and everything to do about investment and jobs and all those sorts of things is dependent on cheap transport costs or transport costs full stop. And if you put transport costs up, you watch jobs lost, and you watch inflation go up, and you watch GDP slow. That's the problem. We've proved it for 15 years. And what they could do is incentivise drivers in this situation and not just, I mean, we're hearing that the SMMT, Mike Hawes, is wanting that all VAT to be dropped so they can buy more EVs. People don't want them at the moment. Yeah. What they want is cheaper driving so they can get to work, get to the hospitals, get to their work, get to school, get to all these sorts of things. At the moment, as you quite rightly said, this is a tax, it's a regressive tax, and it's going to hit people hard. And I guarantee you, Labour will go after the motorists in autumn.
Yeah. Was that ever, Peter Cardwell, you worked in government, you worked as an advisor, OK, not in the Ministry of Transport, but was it always a thing that, you know, if you're stuck financially, go for the motorist? Did you was that ever discussed as an easy target? Because most people do still have to drive, even if it's more expensive.
Well, not with me, but certainly the Treasury was known for seeing the motorists as a bit of a soft touch, because you can't, most people, not everybody, but most people can't not use their car. And even though the London-based media wouldn't have you believe this, most journeys in this country are done by car. So there is this orthodoxy. There's a very anti-motorist, as Howard has pointed out many times, there's a very anti-motorist orthodoxy as well. If you're in the Department of Transport or the Treasury and you suddenly say, why don't we build more roads? Why don't we make the roads a bit better? Well, hold on, no, we should be doing renewables. We should be talking about trains and buses. Well, that's all fine, but the point is that the motorist is seen as a bit of a soft touch, no doubt about that.
Yeah, Howard, I mean, there is that you've been banging on about this for years. You've done incredible work at Fair Fuel UK in being able to keep things down to a degree. But of course, you know, with the best will in the world, there is now a change of government. Their view, as we were just discussing, is perhaps not quite as understanding as four wheels as it is for two wheels, or anything that doesn't contain petrol, etc. So the journey ahead, no pun intended, for motorists could look tricky, not just come the budget, but over the years ahead.
Absolutely right. I mean, I was surprised she froze it last year. We had a big battle for that and we won that one. But then I found out afterwards it was either the motorist, the farmer or the pensioner. We were one out of the three that won that one. How long we can keep that going, I don't know, Ian. And I know with your help and with Talk's help, we can get our message across that drivers are important. They shouldn't be seen as just as cash cows.
100%. Howard, thank you. And of course, get over to Fair Fuel UK's website. Sign whatever petition is there. Believe me, it does make a difference. Peter, our time is pretty much up. How will Rachel Reeves be feeling? Is this like a big weight off her shoulder? Do you think she'll believe she did good here?
It is, certainly. She's still on her feet. She's still talking, but questions will remain. Lots of giveaways today, some clawbacks, but also many questions about things like the two-child benefit cap. If you're going to lift that, where does the money come from? And we're not going to get the full detail on that or the winter fuel allowance money until the budget.
Great to see you, Peter. Peter's back with Jeremy Kyle on Drive from 4 this afternoon. We're asking you that question specifically about social housing. Are you struggling to even get social housing, or is your kid in that position? Our lines are open. Let's first get the news headlines at 2 o'clock.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, good afternoon, welcome back. Great first hour, just looking at the kind of finer details and various areas of the economy that might be affected by how the money is being distributed. You heard it there in the financial statement. It wasn't a budget, but, you know, we read into that, we extrapolate from that where it's likely to go. She's unveiled these eagerly awaited plans, announcing big funding boosts for the NHS, defence and schools, along with tens of billions of pounds for major infrastructure projects. But there are losers in this, particularly the police. That's not going to pan out very well over the coming year. And how do you pay for it all? There's the bigger question come the autumn. Also this afternoon, as part of a £680 million border security package, she's also pledged to end the use of asylum hotels, just as police in Manchester arrest 10 suspects linked to a gang helping Iranians by paying up to £20,000 for fake passports to claim asylum in Britain. More on that too. And Elon Musk has issued a grovelling apology to Donald Trump on X, admitting some of his posts attacking the US president went too far. I think when you accuse the president of essentially being a sex offender, that probably is a little bit too far. But are they going to bury the hatchet? Will we see Elon back in the Oval Office soon? Details on the way, 0344 499 1000. We're joined by Chloe Dobbs a little late, well, in a few moments here on the programme to look at the big stories. And on spending and social housing, Barbara is down in London. Barbara, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Hello, Ian.
Hi.
Yes, slightly different story. My parents lived in their flat in Westminster since 1964, and before that they'd lived in another flat. We moved over here when my brother and I were children. I moved to the States, lived there for about 33 years, and moved back in 2011 because both my parents turned 90 that year. And as time went on, they became more frail, and I became their full-time carer. My mother ended up with dementia. My father had heart problems and mobility problems. And after COVID, I gave up work to look after them.
Sure.
And sadly, my dad died a year ago, and my mum died in January. I've been waiting for something that is called discretionary tenancy. That's been several months. The problem with that is, obviously, I under-occupy the flat, which I'm perfectly aware of. At 71, it's a bit too late for me to move back to the States, to move another country and another continent, so I'm sort of stuck.
Yeah.
And I'm quite happy to downsize, but I have stipulated that I would rather they will probably try to push me into a tiny little studio flat, which means giving up virtually all my possessions. But we live in a very nice building, and it's run by the residents. My dad was the first chairman, and there have been many stories over the years of people who've lived here many years being shoeboxed into studios, which are there really isn't any room to swing a cat.
Yeah.
And people coming in straight from overseas or straight out of prison, straight into the larger one bed.
Wow.
Well, anyway, that's my situation. I had a neighbour who about 10 years ago was in the same predicament as me, and they actually locked him out of his flat when he'd paid the extra rent with nowhere to go.
What, in order to evict him, as it were?
Yeah.
Which is probably illegal.
Well, this was about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I think it was, and I haven't got the full story. But anyway, he went to his MP and did win the fight, and they've eventually moved him into a nice one-bedroom. We live in a really nice building. And
sure. So you're bang in the centre of London.
I'm in Westminster.
You're in Westminster, so it's a nice kind of area, a bustling area to be in, very, very sought after.
Yes.
But there are people, you're saying, in your neck of the woods that have either come out of prison or, I don't know, arrived in the UK in, mysterious circumstances, who are given housing in similar areas near you.
Well, yes, I know that because of my mum's carers who used to treat a few of these people, and the carers do like to chat. So, I mean, I've got 5 or 6 examples, and I think, and mainly, I'm not an ethnic minority, so Westminster, from what I understand, is between 50 and 60% ethnic minorities.
Westminster Council is run by a man who is absolutely obsessed with diversity.
I know.
Like to the tune that he should probably be carted off somewhere and given some serious help. But that's where we're at. Listen, Barbara, you start off a great discussion on this about entitlement to social housing. Who is, who isn't? Thank you for that. 0344 499 1000. And then Chloe Dobbs walked into the studio and said, hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. A bit flustered after TfL failed me, so...
Oh, there's been a lot of that going on. Our Amy...
Sadiq Khan's just been knighted, and I don't think he deserves
Sadiq Khan's been knighted, and both your train and our Amy out there, her train yesterday was... Well, we actually think she went somewhere, but she says a train broke down. And,
oh, no.
Yeah, well, we're giving a benefit of the doubt.
Well, Rachel Reeves is throwing a load of money at the trains, apparently, so I'm sure they will work perfectly after that.
Chloe, Rachel Reeves is throwing money everywhere.
I know.
She is the magician of the financial world. There's a few people not getting a slice. The old Bill aren't getting any money, it seems, and they really need it. So we'll just see the carry-on of shoplifting continue, and mobile phone theft and all that stuff where you really do need more bobbies on the beat. Ain't going to happen by the looks of it.
Well, she claims that the money that she's put forward is going to put the 13,000 extra officers on the street that they've pledged to do so, but I will believe it when I see it.
But that was already penciled in, you know?
Yeah, I mean, she's had quite a war with Yvette Cooper over spending, but I guess she's managed to quell some of Yvette Cooper's anger by promising a load of money for the border force, or border farce, shall we call it, which I expect probably will do.
Do you know what is so
nothing? They're gonna have drones now, apparently.
Oh, for God's sake! Sajid Javid years ago, when he was Home Secretary, talked about drones, didn't he? In the show, we're going to send the drones and the cutters, and it was going to look like something from Full Metal Jacket's opening scene down there in the Channel, according to back then. And nothing really happened. And I still scratch my head, and I think I say this for the umpteenth time. When it comes to Channel migration, you've got two leaders, you've got two Home Secretaries, France and the UK. Two lots of border force, two lots of military, two lots of intelligence.
And you still can't figure it out.
Like 26 blokes on a boat, you can't stop them. Really? Yeah. How would either country fight a war if they can't stop somebody sailing over the English Channel?
Well, we're still giving all of this money to France. That hasn't been watered down at all. Rachel Reeves hasn't gone, OK, France, we need to cut down on our spending, and we've given you all this money and you've 100%. Done nothing with it. In fact, the percentage of boat crossings that they stop has actually gone down this past year. So that's what Rachel Reeves should be doing, but they're not tough negotiators at all. She's tried to win back the defectors to reform today by telling us we're going to end the use of asylum hotels by the end of Parliament. But I'm sorry, we're not stupid. We know exactly what that means. If you are to fulfil that pledge, it will be that they are all in private rented accommodation. 100%. Instead, we're going to see mass evictions that make people absolutely furious. And another story that was out in the Sun today, talking about the cost of these hotels, shows that the cost of housing each asylum seeker per year in hotels has gone up from 17 grand a year in 2020 to 41 grand. 41 grand a year per person. That's crazy. And we learned that overall, that means that it's the amount of tax contributed by the whole of Manchester that is having to bear the cost of these hotels.
And the worst part about this story, when it comes to, tens of thousands of people stuck in hotels, around about 40,000 and growing, of course, and all that goes with it, all the issue with the border force, all of this could be stopped. You could stop all this. There are ways you could you might have to remove yourself from certain conventions, but you could address this. If you really wanted to, you could address it. And it wasn't in the Tories' DNA to really do this, it seems, and it's definitely not in Labour's.
No, absolutely not. I mean, they just do not have the political will to do what it takes. They can tell us they're going to smash the gangs as many times as they want, but let's not forget, this is the Labour Party that the first day they came into office, they decided to scrap the Rwanda plan. Many Labour MPs thinking that that was far too cruel of a policy. They're not willing to do what it takes. And this, when I mentioned that figure of 41,000 per person, that's just one example, I think, of many across, all various different areas where Rachel Reeves is spending money, where you could really go in with this, Doge-like approach that Reform are doing with the councils and make sure that there aren't contracts being handed out by government that are very poorly negotiated and way too high. I mean, you've spoken about the police force there. I reckon that maybe if they had really went through all their spending, got rid of whatever, DEI officers, useless managerial wars and whatnot. They might be able to do something with the same amount of money to make the streets safer. We've got a really bloated state at the moment. We're spending far too much money. It just keeps growing and growing, the percentage of GDP that we spend, that the government spends.
Indeed. And what about this as well, which kind of feeds into it? Illegal migrants paying up to 20,000 quid to fly into the UK using fake papers before sort of disappearing into the ether. I mean, this is just almost another chapter of this grim story, another tentacle.
Never ends. And we don't know, I mean, the police who have started uncovering this, they're saying, oh, we think we just scratched the surface on this. So how many people per year, on top of the people who have been coming across in boats and on lorries, how many more people a year that we didn't realise have been coming into the country this way? And this is something we really need to keep an eye out on, because if they do crack down on the small boats to some extent, the gangs that make all the money out of getting migrants into this country, they will move over to that trade. We had the lorries were the big problem before the boats, right? But as soon as we started to crack down on that with the big fines if you're found with migrants in your lorries, then of course the gangs adapted and they went for the boats. If we crack down on the boats, they will try something else, and we need to be ready to combat it.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, Greater Manchester Police have done some raids on this, you know, and these are mostly Iranian nationals. They've arrested 10 suspects linked to a trafficking ring. But, I mean, this kind of stuff doesn't touch the sides. And I'm sure if you spoke to GMP, they would say, yeah, we could do more of this if we had more police officers.
Yeah, well, the police need to be able to attack this and make sure that the airports and border force, they are able to spot these fake documents. I hope that now they've been able to recognise that this is happening, that they're able to spot these fake documents. But as I said, these gangs, they adapt so well. If they figure out one way to spot these fake documents, they'll start charging more money for the service. It might go from 20 grand to 30 grand, and they'll make even more specialist documents. And what's really scary about this is that, let's say some terrorist wants to come to this country. They don't have to go through this really slow route of illegal migration to get here with all these boats and different crossings if they want to get in the country. They could pay 20 grand and come straight here on one flight.
20,000 quid
This is not just a thing about the cost and of people coming to this country and the numbers of people within the country being too high. This is a serious security issue. We're being told by, you know, all the intelligence agencies, I mean, the terror threat in this country is at, you know, it's at its worst. But I don't think anyone quite gets it. I don't think people are quite recognising that the terror threat is where it is at the moment. I think,
it doesn't really get
talked about. And I hope it doesn't take us getting to a point of having a horrific attack for people to finally wake up 100%. And say, let's do something about this.
Let's move to this story. You referenced the man at the very beginning, Chloe. Sadiq Khan has officially become a knight. I mean, even that sounds quite funny when you put it like that.
I won't be calling him Sir
Sadiq Khan. He's gone down to Buck House yesterday. He dropped onto one knee and they doffed the royal sword onto his shoulders, tapping away to make him officially a knight of the realm. I mean, if anybody deserved it, well, it's not Sadiq Khan, is it really? I do wonder with this, what did he do to get that? You know, you normally have to, even if you disagree with somebody getting a knight or a damehood, you'd normally go, OK, I'm surprised, but this is why they got it, for services. I can't work out, bearing in mind, being the Mayor of London is his job, you wouldn't think so, but that's literally his job. Isn't getting a knighthood, or shouldn't getting a knighthood, be something above and beyond your job, as it were, something a little extra?
Oh, but Ian, he was so extra by changing the colours on the overground line and renaming them like the suffragette line, the mild May line, the Windrush line. You know, isn't that just such an astonishing achievement? Far better than becoming, you know, an Olympic champion. It's embarrassing, and I am. The argument that we should just not do knighthoods for politicians, I think that I'm starting to fall on that side. I think it would, you know, the king is not supposed to be a political person. Can we just keep it non-partisan? And yeah, sure, there are politicians that we might think are fantastic. You might think, Margaret Thatcher deserved to be Baroness Margaret Thatcher. But there are so many people who think that, you know, she was a witch and an evil human being. It's always going to cause controversy. Why don't we just do away with it for politicians?
Yeah, I think you could make an argument about that. So if you served in politics, MP, mayoral, House of Lords, whatever, well, I was about to say you don't get a title, but I suppose if you're in the House of Lords, you've already got a title, haven't you? So, but you take the point. Apparently, Sir Sadiq, as we now apparently have to call him, claimed that the King was chuffed to give the award himself, and they compared notes on being workaholics. I'd like to see what kind of work he does. Khan said that his mum had been emotional about the knighthood since January, calling it a great day for the family.
Well,
She's proud of her boy.
You know, every mum is proud of their son, so of course she is happy. But
even
I think
Sadiq Khan's mum.
I think the vast majority of Londoners, well, some idiots still vote for him, of course, but there are plenty of Londoners who are absolutely furious about the fact that knife crime has gone up, 40% under Sadiq Khan. That means, in my eyes, that Sadiq Khan has blood on his hands for people who have sadly died, been stabbed or seriously injured because of his failures. That's on him, I think, and he tries to. He's technically in charge of the Met Police, but
100%.
It's interesting how he never really takes responsibility and pretends like he's got nothing to do with them. This knife crime problem, it is his responsibility.
He is the Police and Crime Commissioner of London.
And don't get me started on the ULEZ expansion, which everyone knew was just a cash grab, and he tried to pay for all these studies to show that it was going to massively improve the air quality. They couldn't find any evidence, and tried to get Imperial to give him a nice study that would say what he wanted, and they couldn't find the evidence. He was pretty upset about that, but he did it anyway.
But Chloe, here's the thing: you will find more clips of Sadiq Khan talking about ULEZ than you will about teenagers dying because of knife crime. You almost hear nothing from him when another teen dies because of knife crime, when kids are running amok with literally machetes in their pockets, walking openly with a blade, and CCTV around, often even their faces. You don't see. Get him on cameras and nicking cars for a car that happens to be slightly the wrong model because it was like 3 months out of the criteria. He'll talk about that all day long. But kids dying, very little. But what do you get for that? A flipping knighthood down at the palace, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, every time I hear Sadiq Khan speak, I never hear about knife crime from him. What we hear about is how amazing multiculturalism is and how horrible Islamophobia is. I don't know if you remember before the general election, there was that super cringe, like, little sit down on the sofa video with him and Keir Starmer about how Islamophobia is, the number one problem facing this nation. We really need to crack down on it online. No mention in that video of how awful knife crime is in London and how under a Labour government they're going to work together to really crack this.
Nothing.
I mean, I know that Keir Starmer has said he'll halve knife crime, but I don't really see that message coming from Sadiq Khan. He doesn't seem interested.
Well, there's certainly no proof of that at the moment. Just a final one to finish on. Could Elon Musk be back? He's publicly apologised to Donald Trump after posting tweets calling for his impeachment. He mentioned him being in the Epstein files, which essentially is calling Trump some sort of sex offender, potentially. But now might have gone a bit too far. I mean, we know, and I don't say this unkindly or as a pejorative, that Mr. Musk sort of does exist on a very specific spectrum somewhere. He is that kind of guy. People who are like that in business tend to be from a different stratosphere of the human condition, and that's often great and brings with it lots of attributes, but it also brings perhaps a loose tongue from time to time. When somebody tells you you've done something wrong or you've been somehow, put into a different light from the one you were in before, you react, and he did react, and some of the stuff he said was extraordinary.
Yeah, and if it is the case that he made that comment about the Epstein files with no evidence whatsoever and just said it on the fly, like, oh, that'll be funny, that'll put him in his place. I mean, that's not something that Donald Trump is going to forgive him for.
I wouldn't
if
have
he
thought
did
so.
have evidence for that, then okay, but still, I think the way that he's gone about this fallout, I mean, it does look like a kid throwing a tantrum. And you're right that people who are on the spectrum, they do have a tendency to maybe say something really rude or inappropriate and not be able to recognise what the fallout of that might be, how it might make other people feel and think. And yeah, it doesn't come across very professional. And he may have apologised now, and maybe they can be on amicable terms, possibly, him and Donald Trump, but are they going to be best buds? Is the bromance going to be back? It's not. A lot of people are very upset. There are all these like breakup videos online, putting all the nice merry pictures of them together having fun.
I think Musk is a bit of a nut job, to be honest. I do kind of quite like him in loads of ways, but I don't think, that's not like a easy swipe. I think most people go, yeah, he's a bit mad. But I mean, that's almost been his charm and his success is kind of based on that a little bit.
I mean, I'm very much of the view that anyone who is going to be extremely successful, becoming the richest man, in order to be so hardworking and so obsessed to be that successful, you're going to be weird. It's no surprise.
You've got to be a narcissist. You've got to be vainglorious. You've got to have all of these things going on.
Yeah,
and you've got to be willing to tread on a few minions on the way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say narcissist, but I'd say you've got to be a little bit crazy. I do think it's quite common that people who are like that hardworking and that obsessive over their goal and their business and whatnot, they might be a bit on the spectrum. But that, of course, has its other attributes, like maybe, as you say, having a bit of a loose tongue. Yeah,
I mean, look at Mother Teresa. She was an absolute fruitcake, for God's sake. Let's. Chloe, on that note, thank you. Good to see you. Chloe Dobbs with us on the programme. Over to you. Anything we've talked about there and all the other elements going on as well. 0344 499 1000.
I actually think the burqa should be banned. I think it is reprehensible in this country. I think anything that actually blocks communication is a barrier to communication and integration. I know this only too well, but living in East London as well, which is we've got silos of people who don't integrate. That is not how you build a great country. Now, that goes further. Nigel talked about this, about facial coverings, about crash helmets, for example, in public places. This is about law and order and safety. And also, it's about having shared British values. And we need to make sure we do have that to build Britain back to being great.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 24 minutes after 2 o'clock. Back with your comments in just a second. Rachel Reeves, of course, big day today announcing a spending review focused on boosting health, defence and the economy, with budgets rising 2.3% annually. She's pledged record investments in the health service, schools and infrastructure, alongside a £680 million package to end asylum hotel use. Believe it when you see it. Here's her message on the National Health Service and what it means for Britain.
I am proud to announce today that this Labour government is making a record cash investment in our National Health Service, increasing real terms day-to-day spending by 3% per year for every single year of this spending review, an extra £29 billion per year for the day-to-day running of our health service. Mr. Speaker, that is what the British people voted for, and that is what we will deliver. More appointments, more doctors, more scanners. The National Health Service, created by a Labour government, protected by a Labour government, and renewed by this Labour government.
Well, watch this space. Let's speak to Tom Clougherty, Executive Director at the IEA. Afternoon to you, Tom. Hi. I'm a bit of a sucker for a political speech of whatever party. Whenever I listen to somebody, it could be anyone, frankly, I always go, God, they're so good. Because they always make it sound good. Very seductive, mesmeric stuff with lots of nice treasures and nuggets being pulled out of the bag. What's not to like? What did you make of the big review today?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there was a lot of the classic politician's tactic involved in today's speech, which was reeling off all sorts of numbers and naming all sorts of specific projects in a way that it really made it quite hard to work out what was the overall picture being presented. And I'm not even sure if Rachel Reeves got specific and gave the big headline numbers. She did for the health service, of course, but I think you had to go to the Treasury website and look at the tables to work out what was really going on. And there, frankly, it's a fairly familiar story. It's more money for the National Health Service. It's a squeeze on day-to-day spending across the rest of government. What probably is new is a bit more capital expenditure, most of which actually is going towards defence. And they've also tried to sort of change the rules around capital spending. So that's investment spending rather than just day-to-day frontline services. Tried to change the rules so that the balance shifts a little away from London and the southeast and towards the north and the Midlands and so on. Now, that may make sense politically. Whether it actually means that that investment delivers less bang for the buck economically, I think remains to be seen. But this was a speech that was the classic politician thing. Numbers everywhere, very hard to work out what the overall picture is. And I think ultimately the test for Rachel Reeves will be how successfully has she distracted from the fact that that fiscal black hole that everybody has been talking about is still there today, this evening, as it was this morning. And that probably means we're going to spend the summer talking about are taxes going to go up and which taxes are going to go up at the budget in the autumn.
Yeah, and there is the big issue, isn't it? It's all very well saying this is how much money we're, going to put into departments, but someone has to pay for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's right. And I mean, the other thing I'd add there before talking about the tax thing specifically is that it's fine to have spending restraint across government departments. In fact, I like spending restraint. I'd like to see proper spending cuts sometimes. But you have to have reform at the same time. And there doesn't really seem to be much of a reform agenda. Even when you look at the NHS, yes, 3% a year extra in real terms for NHS England. But we've seen how bad productivity has been in the NHS recently since the pandemic. So you have to ask the question, is that money actually going to buy better results? Will we just be treading water? Or will things still actually keep getting worse? And then you're right, yes, okay, to a lot of government departments, this will feel like spending restraint, but we're still running a budget deficit. We've still got one of the highest tax burdens in our history, and it looks like those taxes are going to go up further. So for me, looking at it, I think it's almost a nailed-on certainty that the long freeze in tax thresholds and allowances that we've had will be extended by several more years in the autumn. I think then the question is just how bad is the economic picture come budget day, and so how much more of a hole does the Chancellor have to fill, and then where does she go? Will she renege on no income tax, no national insurance, no VAT? Will she look down that list of tax increases that Angela Rayner is supposed to have suggested, which may be more politically palatable, but I think in many cases may have some unfortunate economic side effects?
Yeah, this can't happen without some kind of tax rise, right?
That certainly feels the way at the moment. So I think the government is really quite boxed in. Even if you assume that Rachel Reeves wanted to cut spending, which I doubt she does, I'm not sure that her backbenchers would allow that. Yeah. Even if she wanted to raise taxes, which again, she might be more inclined towards, but still not her preference, well, the public, I think, has made it pretty clear where it stands on that, and the reaction that the government got from business last budget time, I think, will have chastened them somewhat. And yes, they want growth, but will they really do the things that are necessary to get growth? They talk the talk, but I'm not really seeing much on, say, planning reform, on making energy cheaper, on actually stepping back from what they're doing on employment regulation, which I think could be really quite destructive. So they are trapped, as I see it, and so unless something unexpected and pleasantly surprising comes along in terms of strong economic news and higher tax revenues as a result, I think we're looking at higher taxes come the autumn. And that's not where the government wants to be, but I think without radical action in some direction, that's where they're going to end up.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Tom, thank you for your time. Really appreciate that. Tom Clockerty, he is, of course, Executive Director at the Institute for Economic Affairs. Thank you to him. We're going to talk about social housing as well. This is from Nafatari, I think that is the correct pronunciation, who says, young single British men get no help with housing. My son became homeless when his marriage broke down. He had no money for private renting. He went to Croydon Council for help, sat in the office all day with his belongings. At the end of the day, they threw him out onto the street saying they couldn't help him. Thank God he came home to me. A few years on, he remarried. Him and his wife lived in an HMO, that's home of multiple occupancy. The landlord wanted a cell, so they were given notice. They went to the council for help as they couldn't afford the deposit on a flat. And nowadays you have to earn so many thousands of pounds a month before private landlords will take you on. And why would they, when we give landlords 5 years of rent in advance with all repairs taken care of? Indeed, for some people. Croydon Council said they would take my daughter-in-law into a women's shelter, but my son could sleep on the streets. My daughter-in-law refused as she didn't want to be separated from my son. Now they sofa surf around relatives. They work and pay taxes, and it's absolutely disgusting that illegal migrants can get housing help above them. No wonder we all resent the migrants and want them gone and refused entry. And there's a great example. This is what's wrong. This is what Labour, in particular Labour, the last government weren't great either. They don't recognise it, because the minute you would make the point to them like that, they would say, yeah, you're probably a reform supporter, aren't you? We know where you come from. Probably you just don't like the brown people or the foreigners. Is that how you'd see it? You're talking about a couple being made homeless, and somebody arrives across the English Channel to Dover, and by 8 o'clock in the evening, they're in a room in a hotel, and they're being fed, and they're not given loads of money, and nobody's suggesting otherwise, but they are safe, they're warm, it's regular, and they have food. They also have the ability to see doctors and dentists. You can't click your fingers for it, but the service is there. That has to be wrong at every level. And then the government go, well, why are reform ahead of us in the polls? Why does Keir Starmer have to make a speech he doesn't really mean about an island of strangers? But because of this. It's a great example. More from you on the way. Social housing in particular, it's the one I find really fascinating. We don't really do council housing in the same way that, i.e. you leave school, meet someone, maybe get married, get a house. That was never sustainable for the long term, it went on for decades, but it was never really going to just carry on quite like that. Something had to give. The criteria of how you decide who does and who doesn't get a house is never straightforward. But if you're on a list to get a house, or your son or daughter is on a list to get a house, how is that looking? Because you hear stories of people who've been on a list for, almost a decade. What the heck is that all about? 0344 499 1000. Our lines are open. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Helen says, my daughter was lucky enough to get social housing after a lot of effort. The state of it was disgusting. Cost a fortune to sort. I imagine people new to the country get nicer places, says Helen. Mark in Norfolk. So Rachel is committed to using no more hotels for asylum seekers by 2029. If the borders were closed today, then maybe she could achieve it. But based on this year, another 4 times 40,000, 160,000 can expect to arrive before the end of this parliament. It's an impossible task that is completely unachievable. To deal with these incomers will take 20% of planned new housing. I despair. How will they reckon? What she thinks they're going to do is, this is the great con you're about to see unfold in front of your eyes. They're going to process as fast as they can. So let's just take now, all right, based on the figures now. We've got 40,000 people. Let's say no more people ever arrived across the channel. We've got 40,000 people. You process them. And of that 40,000, 35,000 are given status to stay. They are no longer illegal. They are no longer asylum seeker. They've been given some kind of status. So they're not part of the figures anymore. So you can give those people social housing of some kind, private housing, whatever it happens to be. Put them in a house. And will be generally paid for by the taxpayer, because most of those people will not be working. And you can simultaneously claim, no, there's no kind of illegal migrants in any of these houses. These are all people who have been processed. So yeah, job done. That's kind of how it works. Graham in Birmingham, we're going to talk to Stephen Wolfe in just a second. Graham in Birmingham on social housing. What are your thoughts on this? Good afternoon.
Hello, Ian. How's it going?
Yeah, good, thanks. What are you thinking?
Well, I think there's so many strands to this, really.
Yeah.
I mean, speaking personally, I don't think I stand a chance of getting a council house. I've been on the list for years. I guess I could probably phone them up and check, but I don't fancy my chances, really.
Mm-hmm.
Single white man. When I was talking to your researcher earlier on, I was referring to so-called social rents with essentially private companies with chief executives on enormously fat salaries.
Yep.
It's appalling. Trying quite hard not to swear, really. But
No, I get it. It's frustrating, right?
As an example, Midland Heart here at least in the West Midlands, possibly in the Midlands overall, you'll be looking at £600 to £700 a month for a one-bedroom flat.
Yep.
In one of the suburbs of the city. I even saw one recently, a flat more centrally in the city, £900 a month, and they claim that's social rents. I mean,
wow, and that's social housing. That's meant to be affordable.
They call that social housing, but really, it's not just the price. That coupled with knowing the chief executive, I looked this up. This was published in 2023, so the salary's probably gone up 300 grand a year. I mean, I think it's so disgusting. I can't find the words. But to hear Rachel Reeves in an extremely annoying voice talking about £39 billion, that's just a drop in the ocean anyway. It's
crazy, isn't it? It's crazy. And when they talk about social housing for who?
Well, exactly. Even though I'm semi-excited about this prospect, I'm looking at once I've paid some debt off, which I'm taking the advice of some people that I trust.
Sure.
This is not a time you want to be in debt, so I'm working hard to pay that off.
Yeah, well, good for you, Graham. Yeah, I mean, I know it's the old cliche, but, the harder you work, believe me, these things do eventually happen. But you're right. You're banging your head against the brick wall in the meantime. Lots of luck. Thank you, Graham, in Birmingham for that. This, of course, is on the back of the government saying it will end the use of asylum hotels before the next election as part of a £680 million border crackdown. The plan includes drones, heard this before. New enforcement teams also to target illegal immigration. What are they targeting, though? They don't recognise people on the boats as being illegal migrants. Let's have a listen to Chancellor Rachel Reeves making that promise in the Commons earlier today.
I am proud to announce the biggest cash injection into social and affordable housing in 50 years. A new affordable homes programme.
That isn't quite the clip we were looking for, but don't worry, we'll come back to that. But of course, it does feed into a big story we're discussing today in terms of those hotels. Asylum hotels will be gone, and Rachel Reeves is going to solve the problem. Stephen Wolfe, migration expert, former MEP and lawyer, is with us. Stephen, good afternoon to you. There you were, diligently working away at this for many, many years, along with many of your colleagues. And, well, all you needed to do was ask Rachel, because she solved it in one fell swoop.
Oh, she has. I mean, clearly, overnight, we're going to see the ending of those people coming across on small boats, flying in on planes with visas, on the backs of lorries, and just being found as the four main categories of people who are illegal into this country. And just as if by magic, you know, she wishes her wand away, and they will no longer be in hotels. What they will be, Ian, is exactly as you've identified. The great con is upon us. It started with Rishi Sunak when he began to say, I'm fast-tracking numbers of people through the asylum process. Is they're shifting the concern from national government and the Home Office onto local authorities and council tax and council housing and social housing. Yeah. And that is disgraceful. It's dishonest. The deceit is plain in everybody's eyes, what they're simply trying to do. And when she now starts to announce the billions into social housing that are going to be built, she knows, we know, she knows, we know that this is going to be used to house up to 30 or 40 or even more, 50% of people who are not British born, but those coming and gaining indefinite leave to remain, because that's what's happening in many districts and towns across the country.
Yeah, spot on. And that, of course, feeds into the housing crisis for people who've been waiting on lists for, you know, in some cases, years, you know, a decade or something on a list, just waiting for social housing. People who go to work as well, Stephen, you know, not people who have just sort of decided, I can't be bothered to work, give me a house. No, people who are actually taxpayers.
Yes, and what I found is you listen to that call before, and I heard him, and your heart goes out to men like that, men that I know who've gone through divorces, who have families in their 40s and 50s, who know that they're going to be in the bedsits and never ever get a chance, despite contributing in tax, to any form of social housing. And you know that there are families like mine when I was growing up, to be fair, 250,000 families, people who are born in this country, who are living in bedsits, who will not get easy access to social housing. And the cost of that, the cost of putting people in who gain indefinite leave to remain, who therefore are entitled to be British, there's no categorization that says you can be British first and IDLs later, that will mean that council tax will go up substantially, and we have no control of that.
Where do you imagine then, bearing in mind, Stephen, the problem with this story, we're talking here hypothetically, based on the numbers of people in asylum hotels at the moment, not the increase in those numbers, because, of course, as a previous communicator just mentioned, you know, if you look over the course of a parliament, based on current figures, we could be looking at numbers like 160,000 people.
Well, that's right. I mean, it's actually more than that, because if that's only those who have come over on the small boats, Ian. But if you go back to 2018, there's actually been 262,000 people who've come here and claimed asylum from all the different sources I've talked about, planes, boats, backs of lorries, and the small boat crisis as well. So if you've got 250,000 people, that's the size of Southampton and perhaps Winchester added together, then you've got to house them somewhere. And what's happening now is that distribution is being forced across the country. You've just maybe talked about, or I've certainly seen, the riots that are going on in Ballymena. Well, in there, you saw a whole street literally being placed by people who are of a different background to those people who were born there, shifted all at once. Hundreds of people going into streets and communities all over the country. It's going to change and transform cities and small towns And if people are living in Liberal Democrat areas and areas of the Green Party will say, we've not yet seen what's happened in Bradford or Leicester or Birmingham, where the cultural changes have happened so dramatically because we're still living in nice English countryside. It's going to happen to you because that's the only way that you can distribute people across the country. And they'll do that, and then you'll see further changes to the national culture of this nation.
Always very basic stuff and thorough stuff from you, Stephen. Thank you. It shouldn't take a law degree to work this out, but I'm glad you're there. Stephen Wolfe, migration expert, former MEP and lawyer, just speaking common sense as it is. These are not really opinions now. These are just facts that are out there that are resisted by the establishment, resisted by the Labour government, who are just trying to, plug all these kind of weird holes all over. We can solve this problem. If we do this, then we can get these people here, and then we'll put a few more quid there for the border piece. Like, you could solve this overnight, mate. You could really could solve this if you wanted to, but you don't have the ghoulies to do it, frankly. Don on housing says, when I worked for a district council, there were new housing developments. They had private sale properties and some social housing. Buyers visited our planning office to see where the social housing was situated. Many pulled out if their proposed purchase was anywhere near social housing. Wasn't there, thank you, Don, for that. Wasn't there a time when they deliberately wanted, and by the way, ordinarily that wouldn't be a problem, that you could, when I grew up on the council estate that I grew up on, and lived on two different ones, one in a slightly different part of the town, both in a similar area, but, a 10-15 minute walk. They were also, to get from one to the other, you'd have to go through some housing, private housing estates. And when I used to walk to school, I used to meet a couple of mates that lived in private houses. I was quite impressed by that. They did look a bit different than houses, but these weren't rich people. Looking back on it now, they weren't rich people. They were basic private houses, if you like, but then council estates were quite nicely looked after as well back then. So there wasn't a big difference, but gradually I think some people have resisted wanting to live in a similar vicinity based on what they foresee as trouble coming around the corner, I guess. Thank you for that, Don. Gary says, reference the Home Office, I can just imagine that somewhere in the Home Office right now there will be a delighted badge-wearing ponytail pen pusher lefty who's preparing to submit a bulk order for rubber stamps to their stationery supplier so that the officials can, in inverted commas, process the backlog of asylum claims, which in reality we all know means approve, because as we've seen in the past, that's the path of least resistance. It's exactly that, eventually taken by our government once an asylum seeker has managed to get here. You see, you can't disprove certain stories on asylum. So if somebody says, I cannot go back to Iran because I'm gay, you can't then say, you're not. I can't go back to Iran because I've just become a Christian. You can't then say you're not. And they're just the two obvious ones. There's loads and loads of other methods. And there's lawyers, of course, that will tell their client exactly what they need to do. And the Home Office will, they might resist initially and go, nope, sorry, got to appeal again. So they can say, we've had, people, it's a robust system, people have to appeal. But Gary is quite right. We've said it a ton of times. It's the path of least resistance. We've had Border Force people call us up who've said, and I know it's not the individual officer who's there on the port of Dover who does all of these interviews, but that seems to be the case. It's not, if you really fight it, it's quite hard. It's harder to deport you than it is to accept you. And you think, how is that the case? And with so many people, tens of thousands, a backlog of tens of thousands, that path of least resistance becomes ever more attractive. 0344 499 1000. It's 10 to 3, and on a lighter, there's a lot of news out there today for obvious reason. We've had the spending review. How's it going to be funded? What are your thoughts on it? Social housing, more calls on the way. But by way of a lighter approach, I hate to talk football after Senegal absolutely pummeled in England last night. I know it was a friendly, but man alive, it was flipping woeful. That's two on the bounce that have been woeful. Thomas Tuchel might be walking the plank. Maybe he'll get deported. Who knows? But talking of football, world-class football, we are talking here about the chance to win FIFA Club World Cup final tickets. These are, you can't get hold of this stuff normally without shelling out a few quid, but we've got them to give away thanks to our friends at Darzone. And here's everything you need to know.
Hi, it's Jim White here. Here at talkSPORT, we're gearing up for the Club World Cup in the United States. And to celebrate, we've got 2 tickets to the final in New York on July the 13th to give away. We'll sort flights, accommodation, and give you £5 spending money to spend however you like. 18 plus, UK excluding Northern Ireland. All you have to do to enter is text the word football to 83338 by the 13th of June at 11 p.m. and you're in the draw. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You must have the bill payer's permission or send your name and number by post to Club World Cup Final Prize Draw, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on June the 18th.
This is a TalkSPORT limited competition run on TalkSPORT Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
I actually think the burqa should be banned. I think it is reprehensible in this country. I think anything that actually blocks communication is a barrier to communication and integration. I know this only too well, but living in East London as well, which is we've got silos of people who don't integrate. That is not how you build a great country. Now, that goes further. Nigel talked about this, about facial coverings, about crash helmets, for example, in public places. This is about law and order and safety. And also, it's about having shared British values. And we need to make sure we do have that to build Britain back to being great.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, just coming up on 5 to 3. Now, the Tories have slammed Labour's spending review as not worth the paper it's written on, warning of tax hikes ahead. Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride called it a spend now, tax later plan that risks damaging the economy. The review, of course, includes, as we've been discussing, the NHS defence, housing, £680 million border crackdown to end asylum hotels, and £86 billion on science and tech. Joining us now from College Green is Alan Mack, the Shadow Science and Technology Secretary. Alan Mack, good afternoon to you. Your overview first, Alan, if you would, of what Rachel Reeves announced this afternoon.
Well, I was in the Chamber today, and it was a spend today, tax later statement. They've thrown out a wide range of unfunded spending commitments. For example, they've decided to U-turn on their original decision to cancel pensioners' winter fuel. That's going to cost £1.25 billion. They don't explain how they're going to pay for that. They've also paid £30 million to the Chagos Islands, but giving away British territory. They don't explain how they're going to pay for that. So lots of unfunded spending commitments, and the result of all that is that the Chancellor's going to have to come back to Parliament in the autumn and raise taxes on working people on top of the taxes already raised. So it's going to be very painful for people across the country.
But in the department that you shadow, of course, it's happy days. The champagne corks are popping, it seems. Tens and tens of millions of pounds going into science and that particular area. 86 billion, I think, is the total figure. What's not to like?
Well, one of the rare pieces of news in this is that actually they've reversed their original decision to cancel the Edinburgh supercomputer for the country. We've been working on that campaign for the last 11 months, and actually whilst they've been dithering and delaying, we've been calling on them to reinstate it. So they have reinstated funding for the national supercomputer. That will benefit our scientists and researchers, but it should have come earlier. They really shouldn't be dithering and delaying. And in respect of the wider spending that they've announced today, they've not actually allowed the economic watchdog, the OBR, to check any of their figures, so we don't know if they're real at all, but we will look at the detail.
Is this a believe it when you see it moment then, do you sense? I mean, obviously where you want to spend is one thing, can you raise the money is quite another.
Well, you're absolutely right. We've had lots of shiny announcements over the last 11 months. We've had lots of U-turns as well, so we've had lots of mistakes and a very poor economic strategy from Labour. So we will believe it when we see it, but the reality is that this is a spend today but tax later statement, and unfortunately the British people and British business are going to pay the price in the autumn.
I mean, that is it's a soundbite that one would expect from the opposition. I totally get that. But if they are true to their word, and just looking at the department that you shadow, 86 billion quid, including 22.5 billion per year by 2029-30. This looks at all sorts of areas from drug treatment, battery technology, AI development, etc. This is a moment when you shake their hand, isn't it?
Well, there's nothing particularly innovative in what they've announced. I mean, their figures are very similar to the plans that we had before the general election. So the reality is we will have to wait for the details, see if it's actually real. In January, they launched the AI action plan, very shiny, but there's not been much AI, there's not been much action, there's not been any money at all as well. So the industry is very disappointed by Labour's approach to science and technology, and the reality is their cancellation of the supercomputer tells you everything they needed to know, and it's good news that they've reversed that decision, they've U-turned, but it means that we are now falling behind our competitors in science and technology.
Very final point, Alan Mack, they did say they're not going to raise taxes. That includes VAT, national insurance, income tax, etc. What do you sense is likely to happen? I mean, we know all chancellors like to move the chess pieces around while no one's looking, but how do you see this panning out come the next budget?
Well, they've already increased business taxes, so they've imposed a £25 billion jobs tax on small businesses around the country. That has dampened confidence. It means jobs losses are happening. And the reality is that Rachel Reeves is going to have to come back in the autumn and raise taxes because she's mishandled the economy and lost control of the public finances.
We will watch with interest and with popcorn, I think. Alan Mack, thank you very much indeed for your time, sir. He is the Shadow Science and Technology Secretary joining us live on College Green. Over to you on this one. These numbers are big and impressive, of course, but they've got to be paid for. The budget doesn't happen, of course, until later in the year. When it does, we'll work out exactly what she's done. There is literally no way on God's earth that you can do all of this without raising something in terms of taxation. Now, you might not call it direct taxation in terms of income tax, although you can move people into different brackets, which often does the job for you. Sneaky way of doing it. But of course, over there in the Treasury, there's a big old filing cabinet with a gazillion different taxes in there. Sometimes we don't realise something's going to have to go up if you want to spend this kind of money, and 86 billion on science and tech is just one department. 680 million on border crackdown is another department. That's just two of them. More calls from you on the way. 0344 499 1000. Let's get the news at 3 o'clock.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Responding, of course, to the big news of the day, Rachel Reeves unveiling her eagerly awaited spending review, announcing big funding boosts right across the board, NHS, defence, schools, along with tens of billions of pounds for major infrastructure projects. How's she going to pay for it? That is another question. Did she get it about right? What about the areas where no one is going to be a winner, like the police, for example? The Home Secretary must be fuming over this. Well, as part of her £680 million border security package, she's also pledged to end the use of asylum hotels, just as police in Manchester arrest 10 suspects linked to a gang helping Iranians who are paying up to 20,000 quid a year, 20,000 quid for fake passports to claim asylum in Britain. It's going from bad to worse. And Britain's biggest teaching union told teachers at an event that there's no legal definition of biological sex, which goes completely against the official guidance from the Supreme Court ruling in April. Are these people mad? We'll talk about that in just a bit as well. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. Paula says, yes, it's nice to have a house within the social housing sector, but you have to fight so hard to get anything mended. My back doors do not even lock properly. My front door has a big crack in it. But according to the Housing Association, this is perfectly acceptable. There's no plans to fix these things. Yeah, you've got to maintain them as well. This one comes in from Cliff in Berkshire. The problem we have is that governments think we want them to do everything for us. Free meals for all kids is not free. It has to be paid for. Free kids clubs, again, has to be paid for. The state only has the money it can take from us. And because it is the state collecting it is a fortune, then allocating it and spending erodes even more of its value. Why not let us keep more of our own money and decide for ourselves where we want to spend it? Just what we do actually want the state to, just what do we actually want the state to do for us? It's a great question. Where do you draw that line? People have argued that point forever. Free school meals is an interesting one because it brilliantly goes to the heart of the dilemma. Obviously, if parents can't afford school meals, it's great that the state steps in. There are some people who advocate that all kids should just get free school meals. I'm never quite sure where that thinking comes from. Linda is in Dorset. Linda, what have you got for us? Good afternoon on social housing.
Hi, yeah. I was in my private rented for over 10 years, and the landlord had to sell it because his wife got Alzheimer's, so he needed the money for care.
Okay.
Which was fair enough. So I got a Section 21, which means you've got to be out in 2 months, 8 weeks. I was already on the council list, luckily, and they, because I was going to be homeless, they put me up to a medium need. And this went on and on and on. I kept not hearing anything, so I kept phoning. And they said, well, you won't hear anything till about a couple of days before. And I said, well, where am I supposed to put all my stuff? We'll arrange for it to go into wherever. Fair enough. And she said, but I will warn you, it'll either be a shared house or B&B. I'm 73. I've had cancer twice. I've looked after other people all my life. I've never claimed anything. And this is how you get treated.
Say that last sentence again, Linda. You just slightly bleeped out for a moment.
Okay, I've worked all my life. I've never claimed benefits. I've spent my life working for MENCAP and the health service and private care. And then that's how I get treated.
So the best they can do for you is to share a place with someone?
Yeah, shared housing. And it could be up to 5 years before I got housed properly. So I couldn't cope with it.
What does shared housing look like? Is that like you literally share a house like students might do?
Yeah, you get a room. Yeah. So I couldn't stand it.
Yeah.
So I borrowed some money and got another private rental, which I really can't afford.
No.
But the irony of it is I'm getting my rent topped up with housing benefits, which they wouldn't have to pay if I'd have been offered a council place. So
There you go. You see.
Nobody's winning, are they?
But then, of course, and also the other problem, because we are so overrun as a population, we in terms of population versus amenities and facilities and infrastructure, that there aren't enough of the house. I mean, I suppose in fairness to the council, they go, we literally haven't got anywhere. No,
they did say there were 5,000 people on the housing list waiting.
That's just in your neck of the woods?
Yeah,
wow.
In Dorset.
Man alive. Linda, listen, I wish you luck. I think you are one of thousands and thousands, as you've illustrated there, that are in this situation right across the country. What is the solution? We say build more houses. You build more houses. You'd have to build a lot more than Angela Rayner is planning, and even she can't hit the target on year one because it's unrealistic. 0344 499 1000. Now, interesting one, this. I mentioned this just at the very beginning. Members of Britain's largest teaching union have told teachers there is no legal definition of biological sex. Wow, these people are making stuff up now. It flies in the face, of course, of the Supreme Court guidance, which was handed down in April. Meanwhile, the House of Lords canteen has been slammed for serving a rainbow-coloured pride crumble. Well, you're nothing without a pride crumble, are you? Wouldn't that look a bit icky? You want your crumble to look like a flipping crumble. I don't want it to be any colour, rainbow or otherwise. Campaigners have questioned whether the colourful dessert was made in protest to progress pride flags that were removed from the cafeteria earlier in the week. To speak on these issues, Zoe Strimple is a historian, author, newspaper columnist and broadcaster. Zoe, good afternoon to you.
Hi there. Nice to have so many titles today.
Indeed. We covered the lot there. We wouldn't have put all of that on a name badge, would you? Nice to have you with us. Listen, this is chapter 7,406 on The World's Gone Mad, I guess. And here we have a teaching union who are telling teachers that actually there's no legal definition of biological sex when literally half an hour ago the Supreme Court said there is.
Well, I mean, the Supreme Court ruling has not been taken up in the clear-cut way that many people hope. For instance, I'm quite the swimmer at the ladies' pond on Hampstead Heath, where there's been a lot of uproar about trans women coming in, excuse me. And then there's, potentially protest plan because there was a hope that after the Supreme Court ruling, it would immediately be clear that those trans women could not come in anymore. And that's not what's happened. So unfortunately, people are feeling that they can that the Supreme Court ruling is just a piece of another piece of subjective opinion.
I think that's
kind of how it's being treated.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. As if the people that have been advocating the very opposite to that ruling, it appears to me, simply cannot get their head around that this is a legal ruling, and therefore has decided to sort of define it as kind of like a bit of an optional extra. Well, they might say that over there at the Supreme Court, but in the real world, this is how we do business.
Well, I think the problem with the Supreme Court, well, that's right. And that is how it is, because the Supreme Court I suppose, has just given a kind of strength or clarity to rules that, hospitals, prisons, schools may want to make. But ultimately, it's discretionary, isn't it? So possibly not in the case of the prisons and the hospitals and the schools, but in the case of how a union conducts itself or any kind of private organization. But actually, the City of London runs the ladies' pond. So, they seem to feel they can make their own choices. So I suppose, unfortunately, it's a little bit unclear what people are supposed to do with the Supreme Court ruling, which is apparently slightly more like guidance than if you don't do it, you're breaking the law. So that's not what it's about. In terms of what the Supreme Court's point was, of course, all the kind of trans law, sort of ideology diehards aren't going to be deterred by anything like that. So, in as much as it is still discretionary in sort of private settings, that's what's going on. But I think what's so bizarre is just the way that the unions are so convinced that this is the path to human rights. And anyone these poor academics who showed a film that sounded like it was completely, maybe would have ruffled feathers, but completely fair play, were kind of platformed, and protesters went at them and the unions encouraged that. And then, to them, they felt that other members of the community's human rights were being threatened. And I think that is, as you say, the kind of world's going mad situation that we're in, that somehow saying a biological woman is a sign of violating people's human rights. To say, even if you're not nobody's saying trans people shouldn't be treated with respect and with dignity. But well,
that seems to be. I mean, there is obviously a lot of politics in this, and I do note as well, Zoe, and I'm sure it's not lost on you, that quite a lot of the people advocating this kind of upside down world are actually sort of just straight white blokes as well. I mean, I wouldn't say perfectly sane straight white blokes, but they don't all see. It's not so much. I don't sense this comes from the average trans person. This comes from agitators and campaigners who are quite ferocious in their methodology. We've seen some of the scenes at different protests, the sort of language that is used. It's almost advocating a parallel existence in life that most people don't recognise, but for some reason they do.
Well, I mean, that's a good question, what the makeup of these kind of passionate lobbyists is. I mean, I think it's a fair mix, but whatever it is, we do know that the kind of formerly loony left has moved into the center and has picked up all sorts of people on its way. And I think you see the identical dynamics at play with the Palestine stuff, where, and the environmental activism. Yeah. And you just see all sort of Toms, Dicks and Harrys who have absolutely nothing to do with the cause and don't seem to really understand any of it, really, devoting their entire lives to it as if it's like the most important life and death situation for them and their so-called communities. Yeah. And it's really distressing to see. But as I say, it's the same dynamics, whether it's the trans, fanaticism or the Palestine fanaticism or the green fanaticism. None of it's about the actual issues.
No, every time. And you'll find probably the same faces at the similar protests and things like that. It's kind of, it seems to me it comes from a sort of, ultra left-wing place. That these people are disruptors more than anything. They hate, they're anti-establishment characters who can't get out of bed in the morning unless they think there's a drop of iniquity in the air, and that's what gets them motivated, and that's what fires them along to advance whatever cause they choose that particular day. And I was thinking about, the identity politics of all of this. We see it we're in Pride Month at the moment. I did notice one comedian online was asking the question, not unreasonably, I can't remember who it was now, why is there a whole month for this? Martin Luther King gets a day, and look what he did. But if you happen to be gay, you get a whole month. I mean, what sort of justice is that?
Well, I wouldn't say that the cause of African-American or Black history or civil rights is exactly getting short shrift at this point.
That's a fair point. But I think the point was made was that the identity politics of the world we live in is overwhelming at the moment.
The gay, of course. I mean, that's definitely true. I mean, the gay rights thing seems to be a little bit of a breakaway now from the trans rights. They do seem fairly separate, although there is obviously some overlap in the kind of activist world, although there's also a lot of tension in that. But I would say, just going back to the underlying reasons, I actually don't agree that it's just people who want to kind of join a kind of pro-underdog fray. I would say that there's a pattern to the madness, which is that let's look at who's the butt of the trans movement. It's biological women. And let's look at who's the victim in the Palestine activism movement, Jews. And I think it's often... I mean, you wouldn't believe the anti-Semitism and sexism I face on a kind of regular basis. It is just Hitler-grade stuff. And I think that there's a pattern. There's a reason that people who like to think of themselves as virtuous are drawn to things that are actually very unvirtuous. Now, I don't think necessarily all these people are consciously misogynistic or anti-Semitic or anything like that, but I do think it's no coincidence that the passion heads in those directions.
But that's because they think they're punching up, isn't it? So as far as they're concerned, they've defined you. You're no better than Pol Pot, for goodness sake. You might as well be Saddam Hussein. No one would tell anyone off for having a pop at them. And once you've been defined in their world as one of those figures, that's how they think of it. So having a pop at any aspect of your life, no matter how horrendous, and I would imagine, I can't imagine what it feels like as a female in that respect, but I can only glean from what I read the kind of stuff which is about as horrendous, repugnant and as violent as it can get. That stuff is done with impunity because, well, you're the bad guy.
Well, and there's an intriguing, position to, connection to make back to the trans activism, which is really, it can be really, well, not just the trans, but the Palestine stuff. It can be really illegal in some of its manifestations, but certainly very hostile, sometimes inciting, borderline. But we have all these stories of, the likes of Alison Pearson, my colleague at the Telegraph, having the police turn up at her doorstep on Remembrance Sunday for a tweet that was, not that bad. And certainly nothing like what I get on a regular basis. And ditto misgendering, that can be
it's a bad thing.
Kind of a thought hate crime or whatever they're called. Meanwhile, unbelievable amounts of just unbridled incitement and anti-Semitism and misogyny just churns through the system, directly targeting people like me or just flying around. And that stuff somehow is not picked up by police or
I don't think I've ever. In fact, you put it really well, Zoe, because I can't really recall the amount of. We talked about Alison's case and the two parents that found themselves having their door almost broken down because they dared to say something on a WhatsApp group. For goodness' sake, the former police officer that was arrested by his own former force for something he literally didn't say on social media. But I don't think I've ever seen a case of somebody saying, we've arrested Mick in Haywards Heath because he threw this horrendous anti-Semitic, sexist, violent tweet towards Zoe, and therefore we've sent 6 of us down there and put him in the back of a van. I've never read that story.
Well, I'll tell you, I have actually tried to get the police interested in some of the material that has been sent to me, just as partly out of interest. If the kind of all the policing of hate crime and non-crime hate incidents only applies to issues of misgendering and purported racism and sort of anti-trans stuff, and it does. The police, they go through a few throat clearing motions, but at the end of the day, the advice I just get is be careful.
Yeah.
So I think
careful.
We have 2-tier justice. It all ties in. It's all part of the same. This stuff with the union and the denial of the biological. This is all part of the same. Madness pie. that we're all.
Well, or crumble for that matter.
Crumble, yeah. Yes. Actually, I thought that sounded quite good. I would be very up for it.
I think that just makes you all shades of weird, Zoe. Nobody should be messing with our crumble.
Well, you can have your normal crumble. There's room for both.
But you can't eat it. You can have your crumble, but you can't eat it. There it is. Yeah. Well, you see, the thing is with crumble, it's got to look like breadcrumbs on the top, hasn't it? Not like some kind of liquidized Kermit the Frog.
I think the liquidized Kermit the Frog sounds fun. I am up for some some crumble experimentation, but I do understand that it won't be for everyone.
Crumble experimentation is good. Liquidizing Muppets, not so good. We'll have the thought police after us at this rate, Zoe. Goodness me, for hate crimes against puppetry. Nobody wants to see. Nobody wants to see that. Listen.
No, hiding.
Great to have you on, Zoe. We'll speak again, I'm sure. Zoe Strimple, historian, author, newspaper columnist and broadcaster. It's a great point that she raised there. You don't see any of those incidents in this area, in this field, if you look at the kind of hatred that certainly females get on such a regular basis. J.K. Rowling would be an obvious example. I mean, J.K. Rowling doesn't state anything controversial that I've ever read. She just basically lays out some rather obvious facts and sometimes emphasises those facts with a little bit of humour. Often there's a little challenge in there to somebody who's been a bit naughty, but she's an intelligent professional woman that isn't making stuff up. And yet the kind of stuff that is said is so... It's kind of, I mean, Zoe just said, she was speaking about the anti-Semitic stuff, sort of Hitler level. It is that. I mean, it's sort of beyond almost. But I never heard anybody getting a knock at the door for that stuff. That seems to kind of curious. You get a free pass. What is the criteria for being a victim of this nonsense? If it isn't some of that stuff, then what the hell is? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
So on the one hand, we keep hiking up energy prices with this religion of net zero, this lunatic end of times religion, which says that unless we cut carbon by a certain amount in 10 years, we're all going to fry in an apocalypse. Completely untrue. So they've devoted themselves to this cult, which has the effect of raising those prices. And then they have to bring in this allowance to help older people pay for the basics of life. Yeah. And then they take that allowance away. I mean, as you said earlier on, this is down to the Tories as well as Labour, but we are ruled by dumb people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. This comes in from Lorraine, who says, I may have misheard your guest, but your guest is wrong. The Supreme Court ruling is not subjective. It is definitive, and any organisation that refuses to acknowledge and implement that ruling is breaking the law. No, she said some people see it as subjective. I think that was the point she was making, Lorraine, that it's been taken by some unions, parts of the NHS, that, it's just a bit of guidance that you sort of take or leave. And Lorraine is quite right. She says, I just hope that so much legal action is taken that eventually purse strings will speak if not actions. The NEU, this is the education union, is unfit to have any influence within our schools, and if it's found peddling any of its ideology within schools, it should be banned under a safeguarding issue. And how did they get to a point that something like half an hour ago, they wouldn't have even been talking about this issue of defining a biological? It would never have crossed their agenda or their path, but now they've got so animated about it and decided there's been some kind of injustice, and because these people are so mad, they convince themselves of the injustice, and therefore ignoring a ruling is not about breaking the law. It's about, in their world, doing the right thing to protect this group of people that mostly don't exist, but they've decided they do. And it's not about respecting or disrespecting trans people. This goes we all know it's much wider than that. Any old bloke that wants to say he's a girl, and stuff like that, just because I put a frock on it makes me female. All this nonsense that's out there. It's very easy to implement. Let's talk to Lee in Cheshire, Reference Council Housing. Lee, good afternoon to you. What are your thoughts?
Hello there, you okay?
I'm good, thanks. Far away.
Yeah. My thoughts on the council housing, obviously that's what we're discussing at the moment, are we?
Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, my daughter, she found herself homeless, no fault of her own. She was a civil servant with a young child. She was seeking housing in Warrington, and she was told to go on a waiting list. So in that time, we housed her at home and did the best for her, and we have done for the last 3 years now.
Wow.
And as the years have ticked by, we've got ever increasingly frustrated over the situation. We've even sought help from local MPs. I even had a meeting with the mayoress of Warrington about a completely different subject, but I was able to go for a tea and coffee afternoon with the lady.
Yeah. And
I thought I'd use that opportunity to ask about housing. Felt a bit cheeky doing that, but I thought, well, the door's been open for me, so So she was quite keen to know what was going on, and I went in the backstory of obviously my daughter. She's in her mid-30s, and she had a child that was just about to start high school, senior school, and she had no home. She was only obviously living at our house due to the fact that she couldn't get any housing. Now, her only response to that was, well, she doesn't look well. She doesn't look bad for it. And
really? That's an extraordinary answer.
Yeah, I was gobsmacked because I thought, what a reply. You know. So anyway, I was a bit annoyed about that, and I didn't go any further with the conversation because I thought I'm just banging my head against the wall here, and I did feel a little bit cheeky about asking at the time because we was there for my granddaughter because she succeeded in sports quite well, and it was almost her congratulating our granddaughter for her achievement. Right. So it was like I just used the opportunity, a little bit sneaky, but there you go. No, it didn't get me anywhere. It didn't get me anywhere, and in fact, it made me feel even more upset because I thought, you know, how much cheek is there? So we pursued.
What do you have to do?
Yeah, well, exactly. So we pursued them through the MPs. Now, every response that we got from the MPs was utter shock. But none of them have done anything.
Yeah. What is the official? Tell us, what's the official reason from your local authority as to why your daughter is not entitled to a house?
They're saying there isn't any. Now, I asked the question, and I would like to know how many people that has been housed are immigrants, and they said I'm not allowed to ask that question. Now, I thought it was quite a reasonable question to ask because at the end of the day,
are there people?
I don't mind, and my daughter doesn't mind. She doesn't mind being in a queue and waiting a turn. But when that turn doesn't come round, and you're seeing unfamiliar faces, should I say, in your local area that don't quite fit in,
you wonder where those people are living.
Well, exactly. So, and there's more and more of them. So. My daughter is in full-time employment and she's a civil servant. I'm not allowed to say what she does, but we've used this at every opportunity to try and aid her to get on the property ladder.
Yeah.
And it doesn't get her anywhere.
So, private housing would be the option, but that, I would imagine, is fairly costly, bearing in mind there's all sorts of deposits and things that go with it.
Well, you know, with being a single parent, it's a hell of a responsibility to jump on the housing ladder.
Yeah.
So she's not in a position to do that. She's very, very proud.
Not in a position to rent a private house.
Well, renting a private house, it takes her over the threshold to what she can manage.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, that's why I mentioned all the various deposits and rents up front. I know some of that is changing, but yeah.
Yeah, local rents for the local area are in excess of £1,200. Now, if you're going to spend £1,200 on a rent, you might as well buy a house.
Well, yeah, because if you could afford the deposit for the house, you could probably afford the payments, which maybe wouldn't be 1,200 quid. So you're in this kind of constant sort of circular pattern that with no sort of light or way out of it.
No, and basically they've just said there's no. The only thing that would possibly aid her claim is if she went to a shelter and lived in a shelter, which I'm not happy with. I wouldn't feel
No, of course you're not. You've got a granddaughter to consider in all of this as well. So, listen, Lee, I have to move just because of time. But your story is, you know, sadly, it's not exclusive. I mean, there's many stories such as this, and it's extraordinary. And it boils down ultimately to simply a lack of housing, right? Lack of affordable housing. And when they say we're getting affordable housing, really? What do they mean by that? I wish you loads of luck, Lee, and to your daughter and your grandchild as well. Thank you, sir. 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk to Richard Tice, Deputy Leader of Reform UK, in just a moment. As a response to Rachel Reeves' big spending plan, she really dealt out the cash today, didn't she? But what do Reform UK make of it? Find out next on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
5 to 4, we are of course talking Labour's spending review. It's been slammed as not worth the paper it's written on, with warnings of tax hikes ahead. The review of course includes billions for the NHS, defence, housing and £680 million border crackdown to end asylum hotels. Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride called it a spend now, tax later plan that risks damaging the economy. He said it proves Rachel Reeves is out of her depth.
Yet again, they talk tough, but there is no substance. The Right Honourable Lady has no grip. She has no clue. The markets and the public see a Chancellor completely out of her depth. Having blown her headroom and more from her budget in the autumn, she was forced into an emergency budget in March to scrabble around to try and repair the damage.
Well, there's a lot to tuck into on this. Let's get a thought, though, from another party, Reform UK. The party's Deputy Leader Richard Tice joins us now live from College Green. Good afternoon to you, Richard.
Good afternoon to you, Ian. Goodness me, what a splurge of spending by a Chancellor that I think is terrified of the progress of reform, but spending hundreds of billions. And where's it all coming from? Yep. You and me and all of your listeners in borrowed money, and I fear that much of it will be wasted. Some of it is welcome, but much of it is wasted.
Do you know, I had a rare moment of actually feeling sorry for you today, because I thought, you know, you and your party have done amazing work on, you know, how we will solve issues around asylum hotels and border issues. And then Rachel Reeves has come along like a magician and solved it all. So, I mean, you can stop talking about it now, because she's got all the money for the border force. She's sorting out the asylum hotels. Job done, Richard.
Well, if you think that, then I've got some sand to tell you, because the chances of her having cleared out the asylum hotels and all the houses of multiple occupation that should be occupied by British citizens rather than illegal migrants, I think is 1 in a million, frankly. But look, I wish them well. Obviously, the whole British people would like them to get a grip of the illegal migrant crisis. She talked, I mean, I did have to laugh in the chamber when she said they were getting a grip of borders. They talked about extra hundreds of millions spending on border security command. That basically means hundreds of millions more cash to the French to give their gendarmes photography lessons as they wave the migrants off from the beach. I mean, it's just ludicrous.
Yeah, and I noted when she talked about asylum hotels and processing, and then she did that thing where she dropped her voice, you know, we will get rid of people who are not meant to be here, as if that's ever been in her DNA or anything like it. And what I sense, and I said this a little earlier in the show, Richard, is that, yeah, they will accelerate the processing of people currently in hotels. We all know what that's going to look like. Here's a big fat green light. You get put into the system. You're no longer counted as one of those asylum seekers because you've now got legit status, and that's where we'll end up. Well, but there'll be private housing and social housing taken away from people who've been in queues for years and given to those people currently staying in hotels in order so that Rachel Reeves can say she did it.
It's not only wrong, but it's patently unfair, because these people have come here illegally against the rules, and they haven't paid any taxes, they haven't contributed, they're not fleeing war zones, many of them are economic migrants. Look, we understand everybody wants a better life, but maybe the role of a government is to make life better for British citizens. That should be the primary focus, not enriching others coming here illegally. And so, yeah, I think that this is a government that's completely out of control. In other data that we've seen this week that is important, I reminded the Chancellor of, you know, confidence is plummeting. And that is demonstrated by the fact that 250,000 jobs have been lost since the blunder budget last October. They seem to completely ignore that. The fact is, inflation is up, unemployment is up, government borrowing is up, the cost of debt is up, and GDP growth is down. And all of that is very bad news. You can't tax your way out of a crisis. You've got to grow your way out of a crisis by making work pay, making risk-taking pay, and trying to keep our entrepreneurs and risk-takers and small business owners, keep them here in the UK, but too many at the moment are fleeing the country.
Yeah. Another facet to Boomerang Rach and her abacus of fiscal joy, Richard, seems to be the ability to do all of this, a lot of spending across all departments, without raising taxation. Now, none of us really and seriously believe that for one moment. Taxation, of course, is a fairly overarching phrase. There's a lot of areas you can tax if you want to, but you simply cannot finance this amount of spending without somebody coughing up the cash for it, and that's going to mean you and me and people listening to us.
Which is why I fear that much of this spending will be hugely wasteful, completely unnecessary. You shouldn't be doing any carbon capture technology with taxpayers' cash. Instead, they want to spend tens and tens of billions on it, amongst much else besides. The good news, which I reminded the Chancellor in the chamber when I spoke, is I can actually give us some lessons, because already in the 10 councils that Reform are running, we're identifying tens and tens of millions of pounds of cash savings in just a matter of weeks. So we're just beginning to actually perform and show people how to do it. Maybe that's because we've been around the block, we've got a track record of success, and we know what needs to be done and what shouldn't be done. And we're only just beginning.
Indeed, and we will obviously speak many times between now and the budget. Richard, final word, got to ask you this, how's that new chairman getting on?
Oh, isn't it brilliant news? The good Dr. David Bull of Talk Radio has had a huge promotion, and he's going to be a great chairman for our membership, for our branches. And yeah, we're very excited. I'm of course slightly biased because David is a good friend, but I know he'll do a good job, and he'll keep us all healthy, of course.
Well, indeed. I mean, if ever, you know, there was an additional use from a chairman, the fact you have a qualified clinician in the ranks is never a bad thing, particularly at party conferences, but that's maybe another story. Listen, Richard, great.
Two for the price of one.
Absolutely. Great. You see, always the prudent speaker. Love it. Richard, thank you very much indeed. Richard Tice, he is, of course, Deputy Chair of Reform UK, with us on the programme. Over to you. That's his response. Reform, of course, and Richard Tice and others in his party do speak from a very good business brain and experience perspective. Something this Labour front bench, I think even on the Lib Dem front bench, there's probably more business brains or people who've had experience of some kind of business than there is in the Labour government, which I find not just a bit interesting and weird. I find it terrifying that you've got nobody in the government of any prominence. I think there might be one who did something, and I can't remember who that is now, but none of the big players, the Lammies, the Rayners, the Coopers and the like, none of these people ever run a thing, never run a business. How would you end up so philosophically linked to some, you know, the big issues of the day without having any kind of real experience of interrelational issues with staff, running something, making ends meet, taking a risk, looking at how you do things responsibly, having to apply for stuff, buy stuff, sleepless nights of making your business work and function. None of that. Imagine that. That's a government with none of that, literally zero of that experience in them. None whatsoever. That should terrify anyone. Jason in Hastings says, afternoon, the High Court ruling, this is obviously a biological woman story, that still seems to be causing so many problems is ridiculous. I'm around your age, and unless the human race has evolved about 50 to 60 million years since I left school 35 years ago, everything I was taught is still relevant. Indoctrination is the new education to this country. Not how to think, but what to think. Yes, yes, and yes, Jason. Bang on. It's like, no, these are the facts. That's what you think. Can't change the facts. You can have opinions. Can't change the facts. Oh, no. You can over there at the Education Union. You can change the facts as much as you like. Back to social housing. Bex is in Essex. How are you doing, Bex?
Hi, Ian. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. Yeah, what are your thoughts on this?
You wanted sort of to hear stories from people who have sort of been on the social housing list, and you wanted to know how we're doing.
Yes.
Not very well.
Go on.
So I live at home with my mum. I'm 33, and I went on the housing list in 2019.
Right.
I have disabilities, so I'm actually considered like a higher priority in their eyes. And it's been 6 years.
Wow.
And now, when you go on the website, there's actually nothing to bid on. There is nothing there up for offerings. I don't even think they put them on there, because what happens is you'll get someone who's just come into this country, they'll go down there with all their children, and they'll just be given to them. That's it. That's
the
how it
minute
works.
you have kids, as I'm sure you know, you take priority over someone like yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, which is absolutely fine. Like
I mean, in some cases it is. The actual individual story, I get. There's a couple of kids there. They're 3 and 4. It's not their fault. Blah blah blah. I get that, but the principle is completely wrong, isn't it?
It is, because the thing is I think that the priority should be British-born people. If you have come from a country, let's say Romania, Albania, there's not a war going on there. There hasn't been a war going on
100%.
there. You are coming here for a better life, which means when you're getting that better life, someone who was born here, where they've paid taxes, all their parents have paid taxes, all their ancestors have built up all this country, and they're getting priority over that person, and that is just not right, and that's where people really get angry.
Our last texter that was talking about a different story, Bex, about the High Court ruling and the biological woman story, said, let's not go there. He said, but he made this point. He said, indoctrination is the new education in this country. It's how to think, not how to think, but what to think. And the reason I mention that in this context is because everything you've just said about people jumping the queue, we've been taught over years that it's not good to say that stuff. That's very bad to say, oh, look, there's some Romanian people came and they got a house because they had a couple of kids. What about British taxpayers or the parents of taxpayers? Sorry, that's a fact, isn't it? It's a fact that if you're a taxpayer, if you're a Brit, you should have a priority. It's not even a priority. The word priority is wrong. It's just you should have that right. That's how it should be.
It's common sense. Absolutely. We are just getting put to the back of the line. But when you talk about indoctrination education, see, I have my own business. So everything you were just saying there about business owners, I felt like you was explaining my life. And I work in AI and tech.
Got it.
With my business, and they're not teaching that to kids in school. They're not teaching it whatsoever. And we are heading towards a future where AI is going to be, as you know, it's already taking jobs. It's going to continue to do that. The kids don't know how to use it to their advantage.
Oh, this is going to be huge, right? 10, 15, 20 years' time.
Yes.
But this country won't know what's hit it.
Not even that. It will be 5 years, 10 years tops, and they're going to be screwed because all they're going to know is how to tick boxes, pass exams and memorise text and behave and don't chat back. That's all they're going to know. But let's face it, that suits the government for people to be obedient and not chat back, because if all of us ants all stick together, they know they're in trouble.
Yeah, even in Essex.
Even in Essex.
God's own county, right?
We're a force of our own. We are a force of our own.
Whereabouts in Essex are you, Bex?
I'm in the rough ends. I'm around like Romford area.
Romford? It's like the capital of Essex, right? Yeah, I know Romford. So,
I don't know. There's better places in Essex. But yeah, something needs to be done. Everyone knows that, but it's a question of what to be done. Everyone... It is so difficult, but if people just give up and keep accepting whatever stuff they want to throw at us and we're just going to sit down and take it, they're going to be sorry, because people just won't take it. You're pushing too far and they will, they're going to be in trouble.
100%. Bex, great call. Thank you. I wish you loads of luck as well on that list, but from what you've said, it's going to be more years trying to fight just to get a roof over your head. Lots still to come. Jeremy Carl's here at 4. We'll talk to him shortly to find out what's going on. More comment coming from you. 0344 499 1000.
She's lost control of the public finances. We know that. We know that she made a forecast in March about where borrowing was. Literally just a month later, she was already £14 billion behind. And then she made the disastrous decision last year about winter fuel payments. Now she's reversed it. That doesn't look good. And she's not worked out how she's going to pay for it. While she's saying all this good news about how she's spending money here and spending money there, families will be wondering, well, what is this going to mean for me later in the year? Is she going to come back and ask me for more taxes?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is indeed Talk. 0344 499 1000. Let's go back to your calls. Daniel is in Epsom. How you doing, Dan?
Hello, mate. How are you?
Yeah, good. Where you been? You've been in jail or something? What's happened? I haven't heard of you for ages.
Oh, mate, I've been quite busy, actually. The business is going really well.
Yeah, that ferry business you've got across the channel, how's it going? Is it all right?
Ferries and hotels, I mean.
That's where the money is, mate.
Oh, mate, isn't it just? Well, that's the worrying part, because I just think this one issue, what most of the, if you like, the uniparty, the Conlab uniparty, what they're missing, what they're not really grasping, is that the majority... I've noticed in recent decades that successive governments, they don't really do the things that the majority of Britons want them to do.
Yes.
And this immigration issue is getting worse and worse. We can all see like about 72 million people here. There's probably more. No one really knows. And they're trying to use an infrastructure that's probably fit for about 50 million people.
Yep.
Nothing publicly run works. Now, if you don't get a grip of legal immigration and stop illegal immigration, what's it going to be in a decade? 82 million people? At what point do we actually sink under the weight of... Listen, and people move in here, millions of people move into Britain for a better life, but it's at the detriment of ours. And I just think this one issue is going to get rid of any party that doesn't deal with it.
Yeah.
And I can tell you now, everyone I know, family, friends, everyone, the majority of Britons out there, if it continues on like this, all of us are going to vote for reform. I just think they're going to win the next general election because they want to bring common decency back. Like the sort of common decency when I grew up on an estate in London that most people tended to have, right? We want law and order. We want our borders to be. I want the borders closed.
Sure.
And people are talking about what we're going to do in the hotels with these migrants. I wouldn't spend any money on them whatsoever. And I actually want the million that are already here deported. And I think the strength of feeling. The powers that be or the elite, there's obviously some kind of dark group with their hands up their backsides making them do this because they obviously not listening to us. And I'm telling you now, Reform are going to win the next general election.
It's going to be interesting. The question I suppose some are raising is when they get into, assuming they won the election, they get into office, are they able to do all the things they want to do? Even if you left the ECHR, that will be a given. That could be a lengthy process. Who knows? Would there be a tangible difference, or would they say, right, from today, no one's going to cross the channel, and that will be it?
No, I think that horse has ridden off into the sunset. I think we need bold, decisive, strong government.
Well, we do. But are you going to get that? Because Nigel Farage has previously said, we couldn't deport everybody. But you're saying that you think there's 1 million people out there that could be deported.
Yeah, we want them deported because they shouldn't be here.
Who are the million that you're talking about? I mean, some of these people we can't identify, though, right?
Yeah, but we'd have to work out a way of doing it, because this has gone on for far too long. This issue, it's in the news media every day now.
Yeah.
Listen, this has been a big topic. Legal immigration and illegal immigration has been a big issue.
100%. Probably more headlines than any
20.
other subject.
And Ian, the alternative is what? Continuing to vote for the ConLab Uniparty and continuing to get the same outcome. That's the definition of madness.
Yeah.
We have to be bold, and we have to do something, and we have to tell the MPs who work for us why. I think we're one big incident away from massive public discourse in this country. If someone who came here on a boat commits a terrorist act and he shouldn't have been here, the people are going to rise up. Our buildings of Whitehall, Parliament, we're going to take them back. These MPs work for us. They better start listening, or they're in deep trouble.
Well, some of them are going to be in a lot of trouble come 2029. You're not wrong about that. Daniel, I've got to move. You've been great as ever. Thank you very much indeed for that. Interesting one here. Doesn't say who it's from. If you build 300 houses, 30 are social housing, 270 for sale, none for open market renting. If you offered pensioners 2% above bank interest rates, then used it to buy houses to rent open market, managed by responsible landlords and housing associations, 10% social, 40% open renting, 50% for sale. The shortage is in homes to rent, not to buy.
Homes under the hammer. How are you?
Homes under the hammer.
Bring a child to work today. I brought my son, who's now officially taller than me.
I've just been chatting to him.
Well, you should do. He's probably your son anyway, isn't he? To be fair. How are you? Can you help me out? Because you're far more intelligent than me.
I'm not so sure.
I've been running around. We're moving house today, so there's people everywhere. And my brain is
again.
Well, yeah. Anyway, so the spending review.
Yes.
I mean, the number one is we're going to deal with costly asylum-seeking hotels, says Rachel Reeves.
Yes.
By 2029.
Yeah.
So it's going to be another 8 billion a year for the next 5 years, which is 40 billion.
Correct.
And then the rumour is presumably what they're going to do with them afterwards. I wanted to hear how they were going to stop them coming in the first place.
Well, they don't get into details like that. No, because but what will happen is, based on current figures, by 2029 there'll be another 160,000 people come here.
So where are we going to put them? Oh, we're building houses for them.
We're building houses, or we'll just build hotels maybe for them. And they'll say, no, they're not asylum hotels. They're not like the Holiday Inn.
Why don't we spend the time and the money on creating an organisation, a force, or a body that can say to these people, you can't come here?
Oh, you're just talking silly now, Jeremy.
Why am I talking silly?
It's crazy.
Is it?
The idea that a government should have a solid, robust immigration policy, I mean, whatever next?
I can't believe it.
It's a craziness.
She promised an £11 billion boost for the Ministry of Defence.
There's loads of money out there.
More money for policing. The council. We are going to be taxed to the backside of our bits, aren't we?
Well, someone's got to pay for it.
But the thing that really annoys me today, and I want to show you, I want to know what you all think. Gibraltar. This would be the biggest story of the day if it wasn't for Richard III.
In any other world, that's exactly what it would be. Gibraltar.
So where do you stand on this, truthfully?
Well, Gibraltar's a British territory, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's as simple as that. I mean, you can go into the history of it, but if Spain want to have an argument about what is and what isn't a sovereign territory, there's plenty of places around the world that
so is this government just going to give things away? Absolutely. So this government is just going to give stuff away. The Chagos Islands, Gibraltar, everything, right?
You're forgetting David Lammy loves to give an island away.
Does he?
Loves it, yeah.
Not as much as he likes a 6-course meal.
Well, he certainly loves a few of those.
Isn't Gibraltar famous for those animals on the rock doing
things?
Aren't they supposed to spend a lot of time pleasuring themselves?
Well, I think, there's not a lot to do in Gibraltar, to be fair. So
why would you want it anyway?
Maybe that's it. Well, I used to live down there for a little bit. Not in Gibraltar.
Yeah, but that was tax evasion.
On the old Costa del Sol.
Tax evasion and drug dealing.
I was only a nipper at the time, but we used to go down to Gibraltar.
Sorry, how did you go from Scunthorpe to Marbella?
Well, no, it wasn't that quick. No, I was about 18, 19 when I went down there. And
what were you doing?
Just staff, monkeying around hotels. Monkeying around hotels.
Gibraltar rocking it around the place.
It was at the time when people